starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the Architectural Board of Review agenda for March 22nd of 2021. We'll start with a roll call, please.
All right, thank you, Chair Moore. I'll go ahead and take the roll call. We have Chair Moore.
Here.
Vice Chair Six.
Here.
Board Member Anderson.
Here.
Board Member Black.
Here.
Board Member Olson.
Here.
And Board Member Whalen.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, and now we'll move on to our next general business, which is public comment. Any member of the public may address the board for up to 2 minutes on any subject within our jurisdiction that is not on today's agenda. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
Thank you, Chair Moore and board members. I do see some members of the public have logged into the GoToWebinar. If you would like to speak on any item that is not on today's agenda, please click the GoToWebinar raise your hand button and I'll call on you and give you 2 minutes to speak. While we're waiting for the members of the public to see if they'd like to do that, Mary, have we received any general written public correspondence?
Thank you, Christina and Chair Moore. We did receive a letter from Lisa Carlos and it was distributed to the board before this meeting.
I do not thank you, Mary. I don't see anybody has raised their hand wishing to speak for general public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Then we will close public comment and go on to approval of the minutes for March 22nd.
So moved. Second.
Okay. All right, seconded by Mr. Olson, I believe. Is there any discussion? No? Okay, let's take a vote.
All right, I'll go ahead and start with Chair Moore.
I'll abstain. I was not present.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Six.
Yes.
Board Member Anderson.
Yes.
Board Member Black.
Yes.
Board Member Olson.
Yes.
And Board Member Whalen.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, and then we'll move on to the approval of the consent calendar for March 29th.
Move we accept as presented.
Second.
Okay. And any discussion?
Do we not normally read that? Or is this,
Well,
this was, no, this one was presented
Sometime
before. Yeah, okay.
Vice Chair Six and Chair Moore, I think that when the minutes have been posted for at least a week, it probably makes good sense time-wise for us to not read them. But I would prefer to read just the ones that were done during that day's consent, to read those ones, because there's a very short window of time to expect that the board would log in between.
Great, thank you.
okay, so if there's no discussion, let's take our vote.
All right, I'll go ahead and start with Chair Moore.
Yes.
Vice Chair Six.
Yes.
Board Member Anderson.
Yes.
Board Member Black.
Yes.
Board Member Olson.
Yes.
And Board Member Whalen.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, now April 5th.
Move we approve as presented.
Second.
Okay. Second by Ms. Anderson. Any discussion? No? Okay, let's do our vote.
All right, so we have Chair Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Six,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Black,
Yes.
Board Member Olson,
Yes.
and Board Member Whalen.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, and then the 12th, I believe.
Move we accept as presented.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? No discussion. Okay, let's take the vote.
All right, I'll start with Chair Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Six,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Block,
Yes.
Board Member Olson,
Yes.
and Board Member Whalen.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, and now the 19th.
Thank you, Chair Moore. Today's consent calendar on April 19th was reviewed by Board Members Anderson and Olson. 423 West Victoria Street Playground Replacement Project received project design and final approval.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move
Somebody want
for,
to go
I'll
ahead.
move for approval.
Okay,
Second.
second by Mr. Black. Any discussion? No. Okay, let's take our vote.
All right, we have Chair Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Six,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Block,
Yes.
Board Member Olson,
Yes.
and Board Member Whalen.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to announcements, requests by applicants, future agenda items, etc. Any announcements?
Thank you,
Anybody?
Chair Moore, staff has several announcements. The first announcement will be made by Project Planner Rosie Deisty. Rosie, would you like to make your announcement, please?
Sure. Chair Moore and members of the board, good afternoon. I'm here to let you know about a grant-funded project that we are just starting on for objective design standards. And some of you may know that over the past couple of years, I've been working on objective design standards specific to projects that qualify for streamlined ministerial approval under Senate Bill 35. In the meantime, we applied for a grant from the State Department of Housing and Community Development, and were awarded $285,000 to continue this process in a new phase of objective design standards. We have a request for proposals out now, and in this next phase, we'll be looking at expanding design standards to cover potentially different styles of architectures, different types of buildings, maybe specific standards for affordable housing projects or for green buildings. We will be convening a stakeholder work group or subcommittee to help us with this process. We expect to convene that group around probably this summer, and we would be meeting until approximately fall of 2022. I imagine we'll be asking for some help from your board on this subcommittee or stakeholder group. And we have until, I believe it is summer 2023 to complete the project under the grant. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Chair and Ms. Dicey, there seems to be a lot of questions. Will there be some literature of what this will be about and apply to, and what it does to our purview and so forth in the future?
Yes, Chair Moore and members of the board. we can definitely come back to you like we did when we started the objective design standards that we worked on in the last couple of years. We can come back to you with a work program overview and go into more detail when we have a little more time and can put it on the agenda.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for your time. And like I said, you'll hear back from us in the next few months.
For Mr. Moore, Chairman Moore, I will thank Ms. Dicey.
Vice Chair Six, I don't see Chair Moore on the GoToWebinar. I no longer see him.
Shall I continue then?
Yes, please.
So do you have any more announcements from staff?
Thank you, Vice Chair Six and board members. I do have two more announcements. The first announcement has to do with vacancies on the ABR. We do actually currently have 2 vacancies on the ABR, and I just wanted to let you all know and the public know that if you would like to apply, the deadline is Friday, May 7th at 5 o'clock. The instructions are available on our website in order to apply to the ABR. Once they've received your application, there'll be information about interview and selection process as we go. The second announcement that I have is that we did receive an appeal on 825 De La Vina Street. That's the 21 unit mixed use project. We received an appeal on the final approval that was granted on March 22nd. It's tentatively scheduled for City Council on June 22nd for the appeal hearing. And that's all. Those are all the announcements that I have.
Chairman Moore, I have a question.
Oh. Yeah, I guess he's out of the loop again. Oh, there he goes.
I don't know if you heard me, Chairman Moore. My question, I had a question. This is Leon.
Ms. Chair Moore, you're not, you're muted. You're muted. You're still muted.
Chair Moore, if you'd like, you can try dialing in. That might help with the audio.
I can proceed with my question. And I assume that's all right. My question is a continuation of a question of staff regarding Funk Zone murals. Maybe about a month or 6 weeks ago, we discussed this, and Christina, I believe there were some attempts by staff to bring us some information regarding Funk Zone murals. And do you have anything to update us about that?
Thank you, Board Member Olson. My design review supervisor, Irma Inzueta, case planner Tony Bauman, and myself, we actually did meet with the Arts Fund director, Jamie Dufak. And that meeting was more like an informational gathering meeting. So I'm kind of curious, what specific information are you seeking?
Well, the question I asked before is, what is our purview? Who is the authority about Funk Zone murals? When an applicant comes in with a Funk Zone mural, I have assumed that somebody will review that mural, and that there will be some sort of oversight of of where it's placed and what it says. And I realize that there is some trickiness to this question because it's not my intention to keep the murals from being there or to even say what they should be. But somewhere, someplace, I believe that there should be some authority.
Thank you, Board Member Black. Board Member Olson. That Funk Zone Mural Project mural program is in effect. So there is some purview and oversight over the murals in the Funk Zone. The process is that the locations on the current locations that have been identified, and I'm sorry, I don't know exactly how many there are, those ones are already part of the mural program. The questioning with the new building, which isn't in existence yet, was how do we get from an approved location to what's the process for approving a new location which doesn't exist? So those were the questions that we were in trying to figure out. Sorry, I think everyone's kind of freezing up. I'm not sure if you all can hear me. Anyhow, so yes, there's a collaborative effort between the Arts Fund and the ABR for the location and the design of the murals.
So how will that affect the project that has been before us that was set back? Because I don't know that it was set back, but the project that appeared before us, we understood that they were going to have a mural. And at that point, I thought they were waiting to know where and how they might apply the mural.
Thank you, Board Member Olson. For that specific project, they were not waiting on that issue. That specific project still has a couple of steps before returning to your board. In between those steps, they were figuring out the details with the Arts Fund of whether or not that location would be an approved location. Actually, that's part of your purview. And we did ask the applicant that they'll need to provide that information before their next review on this board.
I don't think that answers my question, but I see that it's the answer I'm going to get.
Thank you, Board Member Olson. I'm happy to follow up with an email if you'd like more specific information.
I think that might be helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Chair Moore, you're still muted. Chair Moore.
Are you able to hear me now?
There you go. Nope. No, you're in and out. More out than in.
Right. How about now?
Okay.
Anything?
I heard anything.
Okay, that's
Okay, there you go.
progress. That's progress. Yeah, I've on my end, I've got just a really laggy connection, so I don't know what's going on. I looked at our internet speed and it's fine, so I don't know what's happening. I apologize about that. All right, are there any other announcements, etc.? No? Have we, this is a question for staff, have we, on the consent agendas, have we, do we have our schedule for board members updated, and is that everybody's aware?
Thank you, Chair Moore. We'll be starting a new month soon. I don't have it pulled up right now, but all the vacancies have been pulled for consent reviewers. I do expect that the new appointed members would take those extra fall slots for the consent that board members Whalen and Anderson volunteered for. Of course, if they're comfortable doing that. But as of this time, we have all of our consent reviewers booked up.
Great. Okay, then let's move on to any subcommittee reports.
So Chair Moore, the Highway 101 working committee is still in force and progressing well. We're in a bit of a hiatus as the group, or the highway group, takes concerns to several stakeholders, one being the zoo, another, oh gosh, can't remember. I think they're going to the Montecito Association and so forth. So we're not meeting until the 1st of May, but we're beginning to wrap things up. And it will be, I don't know when they'll be presenting to our board, but it will be something to look forward to.
Okay, great. All right, well, if there isn't anything else, let's move on from general business to item number 1, which is floor to lot area ratio map. This is a discussion item and a review of the public outreach draft of the FAR map, and we are to provide feedback to staff. We have our ticket.
Great, thank you very much, Chair Moore and board members. My name is Jessica Mesker, and I'm the project planner for the average unit size density incentive program amendments. And I'm going to be updating you today on the floor to lot area ratio public outreach that we've done, and also show you our draft map. So next slide, please. As Mr. Moore said, we are here to show you those maps and also get any feedback that you may have, as well as answer any questions that you have. You'll remember that back in December, I came before you and asked for 2 of your members to serve on a working group in the review of floor to lot area ratio. And I'd just like to acknowledge and thank Chair Moore and Vice Chair Six for their work on that at this point in time. Next slide, please. And so in 2019, and then again in 2020, staff received direction from City Council to change from regulating by density for multi-unit housing to instead allowing a maximum building size with FARs. Next slide, please. So regulating by building size will help us put the right sized buildings in the right places in our community. Will also help us protect the historic districts, both potential and existing, and incentivize rental and affordable housing with different tier levels. The definition of FAR that we're working under is the total area of all floors of all buildings on a lot divided by the size of the lot. This definition does not include anything basement level or any open space like a roof deck. And then the next slide has a video that Mr. Bolton will go to show you that we created for our public outreach, and we're pretty proud of it. So we were hoping to show it to you.
This animation illustrates potential build-out scenarios for a theoretical 10,000 square foot lot in downtown Santa Barbara. Floor to lot area ratio, or FAR, is reported for each scenario starting with a 2-story building. This first view is about 80 feet away from the building, the standard width of State Street. The wire box illustrates the property lines and the 60-foot city charter height limit. Typical apartments built in commercial corridors would have some, if not all, of the first floor as commercial. Apartments or residential condominiums would start on the second floor. Buildings that have a mix of residential and non-residential uses are called mixed use. Currently, buildings on State Street primarily have commercial uses on the first floor and offices above. The next view is above the building. While this building is constructed to the sidewalk like you would typically see along State Street, most buildings are set back from the street or have visual interest or aesthetic treatments like the arches. The light yellow color denotes the interior hallway and stairwells. The white area is a livable apartment area. Once again, you can see how the building's second floor is inset from the front and rear property lines. This allows for the units to have light, air, and access to patios above the first story. This two-story building has an FAR of 1.6. This second animation shows the three-story scenario, with the third story matching the second story. From this vantage point, the second and third story setback of the residential units for that open space is more apparent. The building size and height are similar to the adjacent building's size and height. This building, with one floor of commercial and 2 floors of apartments, has a FAR of 2.3. The example would create approximately 11,000 square feet of new apartment space. The next example shows a 4-story building with 3 stories of residential above the ground floor commercial. This example has a FAR of 3. An FAR of 3 is the largest FAR on the draft map. This example creates 16,500 square feet of livable area. Using FAR as a development metric would encourage construction of additional units and smaller units. If the units in this scenario were 800 square feet each, approximately 20 new units would be provided. Additionally, this illustrates a 5-story building, which would be built very close to the 60-foot city charter height limit and would include 4 floors of apartments. This building's FAR is 3.6, and it provided 22,000 square feet of residential. If the units were around 800 square feet, this building would provide approximately 27 new apartments. This scenario could be considered for a project with affordable housing beyond the standard requirement. This shows a more developed rendering of the building with consideration of city design guidelines. Please participate in the surveys and mapping exercise to let us know where you think various building sizes are appropriate in our city.
All right, so next I will go over the steps that we took as staff to create the draft outreach map. Next slide, please. So we started out the process by looking at our existing AUD program map, which is shown here on the screen. And just as a reminder to everyone, maybe new people that are watching today, we have 3 different levels of density in the AUD program. The first is the medium high density, which is the orange on the map, and that allows up to 27 units per acre. We have the high density, which allows up to 36 units per acre, and that's the red color on the map. And then the areas that have the hatch mark over them are priority housing overlay, and they allow up to 63 dwelling units per acre. To do priority housing overlay, you have to propose a rental project. It cannot be a condominium project. And then also as a reminder, in 2020, the Central Business District, which encompasses our downtown area, was further filled in with high density and the priority housing overlay, following the direction from City Council that the best place for the larger buildings in our community would be downtown. Next slide, please. Additionally, we were very lucky to have our amendments processing at the same time as the AIA charrette. And I think a few of you were actually participants in that effort as well. So that had 16 design teams that looked at opportunity sites in our downtown and proposed hypothetical buildings for these sites. We worked with the AIA and were able to get all of those teams to capture what their hypothetical buildings FAR would be, which was really helpful in kind of getting the limits for our FARs in the downtown at least. And so you'll see on the top graphic, that's a building proposed at the Cost Plus building, and it has an FAR of 4.3. All of the AIA charrette buildings had to conform with existing open space standards and also could not increase height above what our city charter allows as the top of height, which is 60 feet. And then the second building on the lower portion of the slide was proposed at the 99-cent store. And you'll see with that graphic, it has a lot more articulation in the building and pop-ins and outs for additional patios. And so that had a lower FAR than the top graphic of 2.8. Next slide, please. Additionally, we looked at the FARs of all of the existing projects, both on the ground and in the pipeline for AUD projects. So on this map, the largest color is that blue circle, and those projects are 2.5 to 2.7. And then it graduates down from there with the colors and the sizes of the circle. So if you click again, Mr. Bolton, it should pull up my animation. So the large project that we have on the ground right now through the AUD program is the MARC on Upper State Street. And that comes in at 2.7 for its FAR. We also have a couple more that have been built on the ground, including 634 Anacapa, also known as the Anatega building. That comes in at 2.2. And then 414 Chapala, which is not occupied yet, but it's getting close, and that comes in at 2.5. The other projects that are shown on this slide are still going through the design review process. And then additionally, although not shown on this map because it's not quite through concept review yet, would be the 711 North Milpas project. And that comes in at 1.6 FAR. And then the next slide goes over the tiers that I talked about on an earlier slide. To incentivize more affordable housing, we have these 3 tiers. The base FAR map numbers that you'll see are tier 2 for rental housing. So if you provide additional affordable housing above and beyond what our current inclusionary requirements are, we propose that you get an additional FAR. And if you're doing condominium project, we propose you get less of an FAR than what is on that map. So the next slide shows the draft outreach map that we came up with through these processes. And it's overlaid with those existing AUD FAR dots. And then the next slide, we zoom into the downtown area. So another thing that went into the creation of our map process was some direction that we received from City Council back in 2019. City Council directed us to lower the building sizes on the Milpas corridor Before, on the AUD map that I had a couple of slides ago, you would notice that the downtown and the Milpas corridor had the same densities. And we heard a lot during the public process in 2019 from the neighborhood that they didn't think it was the same characteristics as the downtown. And we received direction from City Council to lower that from the same as the downtown. And then also, if you'll notice in the downtown towards the left-hand side of the bottom of the screen, we have FAR of 1 areas that are yellow, and they surround potential historic districts and the Brinkerhoff Avenue Landmark District. And maybe Mr. Bolton, you can run your mouse around there. Sometimes this works, we'll see. Yes, thank you. And also on the other side of the freeway, we have another potential historic district. So City Council asked us to also make sure that we didn't put high FARs in these areas to offer them further protection from being redeveloped or having large buildings shadowing them. So we also increased that FAR boundary to adjacent parcels touching those historic districts. Next slide, please. Additionally, in that council direction that we received in 2019 were increases in the allowed building size. So this map shows an increase from Arriaga to Mission, so that orange finger coming out from the purple downtown. So that is proposed at an FAR of 2, and it used to be lower on the AUD density map. And also to increase the development potential of larger building sizes along the De La Vina corridor. And so you'll notice that's not at the lowest, which is the FAR at 1, but we bumped it up to 1.5. Next slide, please. You can continue on to the next, thank you. So as I talked about, we did have an informal working group, which included 2 of your members and also 2 members from the Planning Commission and the Historic Landmark Commission. We worked with them on defining FARs and kind of fleshing out the concept of FARs, as well as getting feedback from them on the outreach draft FAR map. There was not a consensus from those board members in an official vote on this map, but the majority of them were okay with us moving this map forward in the process to a public outreach with our community. So that was our next step in our outreach. We created an online workshop that was really meant to take the place of having an in-person workshop due to COVID. I'm sure a few of you remember back in the day, we would have a couple night meetings in the Faulkner Gallery where we would set up maps and have different stations where the community and the public could come and ask us questions, and we would give a presentation for background information. So none of that could happen. So we found an online platform that kind of took all of those tools and made them into one website that used various different tools for background information, asked survey questions, and had an interactive map. So this outreach process, since it was new, we felt it was important to give a longer timeline for people to participate in it. So it was open from February 19th to March 3rd. We advertised it very heavily through a variety of different platforms and email bulletins. We also leveraged our relationships with other groups in the community, like the AIA and the Rental Management Group and Santa Barbara Chamber, and asked them to send out the advertisements to the group, that they had emails for, so people would know to come and visit the site. And so it was pretty successful for a first time run of something totally new in our community. We had 168 people register. So what that means is to participate in the activities like the survey or the interactive map. you had to create a username and give us your email. And we had over 1,300 people visit the site. If you visited the site and you didn't register, you could still look at the background information, including that video that I showed earlier, and download the flyer on the public outreach to share with other people that might be interested. And one of the metrics that we were happy about was the flyer that was translated into Spanish was downloaded over 40 times. So we feel that this online workshop is a really great tool that we can move forward with. And hopefully when we're all vaccinated, we can have both an in-person meeting and this type of meeting. So more people that wouldn't be able to attend a meeting at 6 o'clock in the library because maybe they're putting the kids to bed or they have 2 jobs can still participate in activities that the planning department has going on. Next slide, please. So in the online workshop, we had 2 things that we were doing, and they both had the same intent. So we had a building size survey, much like a SurveyMonkey survey that you would take through something else, and a mapping exercise. But we really were just looking to get the answer from the participant on the main question of what building size is appropriate in the areas of the city that allow multi-unit housing. And so on the next slide, I'll go through the different things that we received from this. So the building size survey we set up to be a lot quicker than the mapping exercise, and also easier for a participant to finish because it wasn't that complicated. And so each of these pictures of various multi-unit housing products in our downtown currently are corresponding to a particular FAR. And so we asked the participants what these building sizes or where these building sizes were appropriate in our community. So they were able to take this picture and match it to the neighborhood where they thought this size of housing was appropriate. So the next slide shows the building size neighborhoods that we gave the participants as options. And just a reminder, you'll notice that the Mesa is not on here, the Riviera is not on here. That's because they're single family zone and we're only looking at the multi-unit housing zones. So these were the neighborhoods that everyone could choose from who participated. So if you go to the next slide, Mr. Bolton, each of those neighborhoods corresponds to a colored bar on this map from Upper State on your left with the green towards Coast Village with the orange on the right. And so you'll notice that this map is for the 0.5 FAR, and that picture was shown. There was actually 2 pictures for each of the FARs in the actual survey. It just didn't fit in the PowerPoint. So on this map, you'll notice that a 0.5 FAR for the registrants is pretty appropriate in most areas, but not as much in the Funk Zone or downtown or Coast Village Road. Next slide, please. So then we go up in FAR, just like the map goes up. And so the next number is a 1 FAR. And this was really palatable for the survey people who, for all of the areas across the city that allow multi-unit housing. And then the next slide shows a 1.5 FAR. So as the building pictures get larger, it trends towards them being more appropriate in the downtown and Upper State and Coast Village Road, Funk Zone, and Milpas. And then the next slide shows a 2 FAR, and you'll see that larger buildings are now really trending towards being appropriate in the downtown and Upper State, with Coast Village Road, Milpas, and Funk Zone coming in later there. And then the 2.5 of the next slide almost mirrors the 2 exactly, which was interesting. And then finally, the last slide shows an FAR of 3. So that's a picture of the mark there, which was at 2.7, as I said before. And those type of buildings really trended towards being appropriate in downtown and Upper State Street. Next slide. And so we don't need to go over this one because I kind of did it on those last slides, what we learned. The next part was the mapping exercise. And this was really something that you needed more time to do, and you needed a little bit more proficiency with using mapping tools like Google Maps or other mapping tools on the internet to be able to participate in. And so once again, this is our draft outreach map that we showed the public during these processes. And we would ask in the mapping exercise for the participant to take a pin that represented a certain FAR from 0.5 to 3 and drop it on the map in the colored areas of this map as to where they thought that would be appropriate. And so next slide. The majority of the people that participated in the mapping exercise dropped less than 30 pins. And reading into that, it's probably because a lot of people only really care about certain areas of town, not all parts of it, and wanted to focus on where their interests lie. And then we had some enthusiastic members who participated who dropped a lot more pins, as you can see on this map, and dropped the pins outside of the areas that allowed multi-unit housing. So this just created a little more work for our staff on how to disseminate the data. So on the next slide for the mapping exercise, this is how we determined to look at that data that we had. First, we deleted all of the pins that were outside of the multi-unit zones. And then on this map, if you see the pink dot with the up arrow, that means that in that FAR, the public that participated there thought it should have a larger building size than what we proposed as staff. If you see the teal check mark, it means the participant agreed with staff's suggestion on the FAR and the building size. And if you see the light blue down arrow, it means that they thought that FAR on that map should be lower than what we proposed as staff. So the next slide zooms into the downtown again, so you can get a feeling for what the participants in the map felt on this. And then the second slide goes into Upper State and the De La Vina corridor. So our takeaways from the mapping exercise were that the outreach map proposed FARs fell somewhere in the middle of the perspectives of the people that participated in this mapping exercise, with a slight lean towards possibly increasing the FARs. There wasn't a lot of consensus between registrants in certain areas like the downtown or the Milpas corridor. And there was more consensus between registrants in the Coomber Plaza and the greater West Side neighborhood. And so like when we had those public meetings in the library in 2019, these surveys and the mapping exercise represent just a slice of the people that live in Santa Barbara, and so should be taken with that. But in combination with the other steps that I illustrated earlier in the slides, we have this proposed draft FAR map. And so the next two slides go over the next steps that we will be doing. So we are still looking at the data on the FAR map and reviewing the boundaries and the changes that people had in the outreach map, and also some changes that our working group members had, including Vice Chair 6 on if the boundaries are appropriate or if maybe they're shifting in blocks from one side to the other. And then additionally, besides just moving from density to FAR, staff also has other steps that we need to accomplish for multi-unit housing. And that includes making Planning Commission a decision-making body on projects with lots that were larger than 10,000 square feet, and considering local preference for inclusionary housing components of the AUD program. Once we have this FAR map and these other changes complete, then we're actually going to take the AUD standards and code and create a permanent multi-housing standards, which is feathered throughout code instead of being its own section in our Title 30. So we presented everything that you just saw to City Council on March 30th. If we go to the next slide, Mr. Bolton, we asked City Council at that meeting if they would like us to look at an economic feasibility analysis of these FAR numbers before we adopt the changes or after we adopt the changes. And we got direction from City Council to look at the economic analysis as soon as possible. So I'm actually in the process of drafting an RFP that'll go out to economic consultants to get proposals on doing that work. And City Council also asked us to have that consultant look at suggested changes to create more workforce and affordable housing at moderate income levels. And also to look at if there was other incentives that could increase the development of multi-unit housing. So we will have that consultant working on completing that analysis over the summer. And we hope that in the fall of this year, we'll have their study to present to our decision-making boards and either recommendations on the map, if it's all right, if certain areas need to go up in FAR, if certain areas need to go down. They could also come back and say that our increments of going 0.5 each time might be too big and we should drop it to 2.5 or have more FARs than the 6 that we show on this map. So once we get that information from them, we'll have a better idea on if our FAR map will really make the goal of creating more housing in our community, which is why we're changing from regulating by density, because we want to have more housing in the community. So the next slide is our final slide. And I'm really here to answer any questions that you might have on what I just went over, and also receive any general feedback that you have at this point in time. I know that you received the PowerPoint beforehand, but if you need time to digest what I've said today, of course, that's completely understandable. And I'd be happy to meet with you one-on-one to go over your feedback as well. So thank you very much. I'll hand it back to the chair.
Okay, thank you for that. We do need to open public comment before we jump into our own questions. So if there's anybody out there in the public that would like to address the board regarding this item, please follow the instructions on screen.
Thank you, Chair Moore. I do see several members of the public have logged in. Just want to give them a little bit of time to raise their hand if they are interested in speaking on this item. I don't see that anybody has raised their hand for this item. Oh, excuse me. I do see somebody has raised their hand for this item. Mary, have we received any written public correspondence? And then I'll go to the public commenter.
Thank you, Christina and Chair Moore. We have not received written correspondence for this item.
Okay, I have a Patricia Saley that has raised their hand who would like to speak on this item. Ms. Saley, I am going to unmute you. You'll need to unmute yourself and then you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. The Historic Landmarks Commission reviewed this map last week, and I thought they had some good comments, including first, they were concerned regarding the impact of tall buildings on adjacent historic districts, especially Brinkerhoff and Bradbury, which are just beyond Chapala Street. As Jessica just mentioned, they suggested we consider more nuanced FARs, for example, use 0.25 increments versus 0.5 for more gentle transitions between areas. Bottom line, they commented that FARs are a broad brush approach, whereas we need to be using a scalpel or something finer. Pasadena architect Stefanos Palazoides gave a talk a couple weeks ago in a Historic Trust webinar. He stated that one problem with FARs is that they give the same percentage for different lot sizes, whereas a larger lot can accommodate more building size and smaller lots cannot. He also commented that FARs can result in quote unquote crew cut cities, and a lot of Santa Barbara's charm is the variations in its buildings. The city now theoretically requires story poles for buildings of 17 feet or more, but they are not being required. Design review boards have said that the poles aren't necessary for them, but how about the public? If FARs are to be increased as proposed, letting the public know about the size of future buildings is really important. If story poles are not the answer, then it's incumbent on the city to find another tool or tools. I suggest this be a component of the FAR discussion and analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the public who would like to address the board?
Thank you, Chair Moore. I do not see any other members of the public that have raised their hand to speak on this item.
Okay, then we will close public comment. And I know we may have questions. So if there's, I would encourage you to reach out to Ms. Metzger individually and ask those questions. But if there's any particular burning question that you might feel the rest of the board needs to hear, go ahead. Does anybody have a question?
Well, yes, I do. It's Leon.
Great, go ahead.
So I'm not sure that this is the time that you're willing to do this, but as being the representatives from our board, both you and Mr. Six, I'd be very interested in hearing any comments that you might have that you think might help us as we go forward assessing this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll speak from my perspective. The process was pretty thorough. A lot of maps were looked at, and we all took it upon ourselves to walk around the areas and get a better sense of what the impacts might be. The interesting part of the exercise, I think, is the sort of the community impacts and desires versus the push that we're getting from state entities and other forces to increase our density. So that's a very difficult position to be in, and the city is in that position right now. It is going to be very interesting to hear what comes out of this consultant report regarding the FAR numbers and whether or not the development will be possible with these numbers, or are these numbers too high, or they are, what is the outcome of this report is going to be very critical. And so it was certainly it's a balanced discussion, and it's a difficult one to see into the future and see what is the right path forward. Mr. Vice Chair Six, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair Moore. I was, as Ms. Metzer implied, there was a division of opinion on the work group, and I was concerned, and number one, felt that in some areas that I carefully studied and looked at some of the existing examples and resultant sizes that these FARs would result in. And I found that a lot of them, especially in the yellow and green areas, were about 0.5, at least 0.5 too big. And I was suggesting lowering those. I was, with some caveats, okay with kind of the central business district sizes. There was a lot of caveats, however, they mentioned that this was a broad stroke, very crude tool. And, for example, it doesn't speak to setbacks and so forth along the, on the second, third, fourth floors along State Street. It doesn't talk about what the corner building on a corner would be set back. There's just, and also this issue of the sliding scale for FARs for different lot sizes was problematic to me. I have one of the bottom lines was that the yellow and green was too much, and this is a broad stroke zoning tool, and many projects won't have will have many other criteria and constraints that will not allow them to build up to the potentials that these FARs will allow. But some projects, the stars will align, and we will be faced, the ABR will be faced with some projects that the community, well, the developer will expect and be incentivized and expect a right to build these sizes. And I was, we're already losing some of our power from the AUD criteria. And here, I think that this is going to further weaken our power to find neighborhood compatibility in some areas. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. Again, I appreciate the work so far. It was, a lot of sensitivity and a lot of work went into it. And I think there's more refinements and caveats that have to be made. And I'm concerned with building size. Not to belabor it, but I was very surprised the survey increased FARs out in the outer State Street area, and especially in the green areas on outer State Street. That's where I think that I would go the opposite. I would go the opposite. And I think those are where these resultant building masses of these resulting from these building FARs will be a difficult task for us to find compatibility. But the bottom line is, I think we have to shift gears here and begin to accept more building size. Not to belabor it, but the appeal that will just be going in front of council on what is it, on De La Vina, 825 De La Vina. That was within these FARs, and so it's being appealed on neighborhood compatibility. So there you go. We're gonna have to the ADR and the community are gonna have to adjust their appetite, their tolerance for these new sizes that these numbers result in.
Thank you, Vice Chair Six. So again, I would encourage you all to reach out to the planning staff with your questions and comments individually. And we will continue to keep tabs on this subject. And
I have another question.
We do need to move on, but go ahead.
So
Mr. Olson.
there isn't an answer to this question, but it's more of a comment. It seems like we're between a rock and a hard spot here. I don't really know if we really have an option to not accept some of these higher FARs. It seems like that we could not comply with the state requirements if we don't. So I guess that's my comment.
Absolutely, and this is also coming by direction of the city council as well, that we look at increasing these densities. So this isn't this is a purposeful exercise.
I think if I may, Chair Moore, one more thing, and I think that some members of the HLC suggested the same thing. It's really not clear that increasing mass, bulk, and scale and FARs is going to correlate into more housing. And I think that basic question is unanswered, and is unanswered. And I have a problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just address Vice Chair Six's question really quick. If
yes,
you can go to slide 8, please, Mr. Bolton. So one of the reasons that the AIA charrette was so useful to us, when we go back and look at those 2 slides or 2 pictures of hypothetical proposed buildings. So these 2 parcels or conglomeration of parcels are currently in the AUD program. So the cost plus building on the top, if it was built under the AUD program, would net us 40 new housing units. And under an FAR, it would net us 117 units. So that's a big difference. And then the second building, which is on a smaller parcel, but near the 99-cent store, under the AUD program would net us 20 units, and under an FAR program would net us approximately 56 units. So yes, these are hypothetical, but the numbers do show that under FAR, you can get more, and smaller for both of these projects had a mix of smaller units and larger units. And by smaller, I mean 220 to 400 square feet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, let's move on to item number 2, please.
Would you be willing to take a 3-minute break?
Certainly. Let us adjourn for 3 minutes. Be right back. Moving on to item number 2, which is 119 East Coda Street, concept review. This is the proposal for a new 3-story, approximately 53-foot high, 65,000 square foot police station and associated 37.5-foot high, 86,000 square foot parking structure to accommodate 244 parking spaces at the existing 1.61 acre Coda commuter parking lot. Each structure would have a subterranean level. 8 additional surface parking spaces would be provided. Existing police operations would be consolidated at the new site. Grading includes 22,000 cubic yards of export and a total of 24 Tipuana tipu trees and 6 oak trees would be removed. The existing plaques commemorating the old Lincoln School would be relocated on site. On March 18th of this year, the Planning Commission approved the building height exception to allow for buildings up to 60 feet in height. Project requires development plan approval by the Planning Commission. And no final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. This project requires compliance with the urban design guidelines, infill design guidelines, and outdoor lighting design guidelines. And was last here February 12th. Okay. We have budgeted for this project 60 minutes total. So we do have our 15-minute timer for the presentation. We want to make sure everyone's aware of, and we'll see if we need to adjust that as we go, but let's try and stick with that. The motion, previous review is in front of us, so we can look through that, remind ourselves, and we can ask our applicant to come on screen and begin their presentation.
Chair Moore, I just have a
Planning
brief
staff has,
just
go
a real
ahead.
quick status. You mentioned most of it already. The last review was February 12th, and then the project went to Planning Commission on March 18th. So the Planning Commission held the concept review of the project at that point and provided lots of comments for staff and the applicant. And then they did approve the building height exception to allow the building up to 60 feet, like you said. Vice Chair Six did speak at the hearing on your behalf, conveying the comments that you had. And then today is a continued concept review. And after this meeting, the next step for the project would be a formal submittal to planning staff and environmental review at that point. So that's where we are in the process. That's all I wanted to just make sure everyone understood where we are. And I'm available for any questions. If you have any questions later on. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, we have our, looks like we have representatives from the city and our applicant. Excellent, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Thank you, Chair Moore, and good afternoon, members. I'm just going to take a quick minute for an intro. Based on some public comments that have come in, I just want to quickly let the board know and those watching what we've done in lieu of story polls to address some concerns. We've put up photo simulations in 3 locations on site showing the existing and what is proposed, and hopefully you've had a chance to see those. We have 2 digital simulations, one flyover of the site that's superimposed in context to the surrounding buildings and to the city. The other is a walk around that starts on Coda Street and then turns up Santa Barbara Street to the entry. And the photo simulations and the digital simulations are all on the police station website for which is consistently updated for public viewing. And I know the board received another letter from Sam Edelman, the GM for the general manager for the Farmers Market Association. And Sam shares the same concern we have about the impact installing story poles would have on the farmers. It would require about a week to install the poles and about a week to take them down, along with the time in between for viewing. But this would keep the farmers market out of the Coda lot for a minimum of 2 weeks, most likely 3, resulting in hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost revenue to the farmers. And this is an impact that we would very much like to avoid. So we are confident that the simulations and the renderings provide both the board and the public an effective means of evaluating this project. So with that, I'd just like to turn it over to Brian for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Members of the ABR, thank you. Appreciate being back, and I think you're going to appreciate some of the changes we've made. We presented exactly what we showed you the last time to the Planning Commission, but we did add one feature, which was the flyover that Brad just mentioned. So Mr. Bolton, if you could load that up, and we'll have you look at that initially, and then we'll show you what we've been working on to refine the design. There we go. So obviously we're hovering over Ortega right now, looking back at the building. This just, I think this view gives you a good context of the building within this neighborhood surrounds. And Mr. Bolton, if you'll then take us to our site plan, I think it's on page 6. We'll get started right there in the interest of time. So the really good news that I'm pleased to announce is Public Works has agreed to allow us to expand into Santa Barbara Street to create additional landscaping along that stretch. So you can see that in this plan. And Courtney will be talking more about the landscaping concept for that. But that's changed dramatically. Just the whole corner element is effectively, it will narrow there at Santa Barbara Street up to the entrance of the police station, or at Coda Street, sorry. What we've also done is we have been playing with the tower element and also carving the building back from Santa Barbara Street. So you can see that there's a nice step back that's occurring along Santa Barbara Street now to the main entrance, which we think is really going to help to make that entrance more visible. On the Coda Street side, the important thing that we've done is taking your all's advice. We were able to take the IT component of the police department and move them down along Coda Street. So we now have the fleet bicycle function and the IT function there along the streetscape. So I'm not going to go into the floor plans right now. I think what we should do is jump right to the renderings, which start on page 11, and show you what we have done. So you can see that this has changed somewhat. And by the way, Mr. Bolton has the set from our last meeting. If you all would like to review that or look back at what we had shown you before, but we didn't want to take the time right now. So you can see that roofed element there in more or less the middle of the screen is that IT function that has moved up against Coda Street. And we purposely kept the parking structure off the top of that so that we could introduce this one-story roof. You can also see that the result of that is kind of allowing that stair tower to be a little bit more dynamic and turn the corner. So it has the high corner window that you see. And we've also continued to just refine the detailing at the parapet. This portion, of course, is where we're going to introduce a little bit more of a parklet space, which Courtney's going to talk about. Next slide. So this is looking at that IT function and the stones and benches and elements that are going to be there along Coda Street. We've also introduced some additional roof elements at that stair tower. We've gotten rid of that eyebrow that I think was troubling the members for some time. Next slide. In this view, we've actually extended the overhang and increased the roof there on that two-story portion. We've simplified the openings along there, and we also lowered the trellis element that is over that corner open deck space. Next slide. So this is a view at the corner now. We also got rid of what was a pretty anemic little sign there and incorporated more of a planter element where the signage at the corner would be for the police department, and you know, addressed also some of the landscaping thing. But again, in this elevation, that corner element has lowered about a foot. Next slide. You can also see in that, Mr. Bolton, would you go back for a moment? Sorry, I jumped too soon. You can also get a good sense from this particular view what that additional parkway space does to the Santa Barbara Street side. And of course, that would all be a red curb along there. Now we can move on. So in this next view, you just begin to now get a sense of the tower, which we've modified, and you'll see more of that in a moment. And again, on the two-story portion, we've extended that roof overhang and the height of the parapet, effectively sort of lowering that portion of the building. Next slide. So now you can begin to see what I was talking about as far as carving away the entrance for the tower. We've also increased the height of the tower a little bit and affected its proportions slightly. Next slide. We've also introduced this one-story element, which is kind of a nice pedestrian scale at this entrance. We continue to have this palm arcade that Courtney will talk more about in a moment. Next slide. And here you can get a better sense of that revised tower and the entrance, main entrance element. Next slide. So just a blowing up on that entrance element. So you can see how the building massing there from left to right really peels back to allow as much sunlight into that entrance court as possible. Next slide. And then this is, I think, our final view looking back towards the entrance. And what I'd like to do now is go to our landscape plans, Mr. Bolton, and we can let Courtney kind of go from the entrance back to Coda and talk a little bit about the landscaping. Have at it, Courtney.
Thanks, Brian. Mr. Bolton, can you go to the next page? That's an enlarged plan, so we can start there. And if you would zoom in on the entrance plaza on the upper left or upper right side of the plan. So I'll just walk everyone around the building, just going reverse from what Brian did. So as Brian mentioned, we did work with his office to kind of step back the building at the entry here. So the plaza with the palm court has expanded even more. So, you know, the corner of the building sort of peels away there and opens up to Santa Barbara Street to the south. And then in addition to that, we gained about 7 feet of space kind of reaching out into Santa Barbara Street. So I'm so glad that, you know, the commission felt strongly about, you know, grabbing that extra land because it gave us, you know, that extra oomph to be able to actually, you know, do this. And so what we have is, as you move down Santa Barbara Street, so if Mr. Bolton could kind of scoot the plan south, is that basically gives us a much wider and more generous streetscape experience here. So before we had about a 6-foot sidewalk and just, I think, 4 foot of parkway and the curb. And now we have an 8-foot sidewalk and shoot, now I lost it.
We should have it 9.5 feet of planter.
Yeah, so there it is. So 9.5 foot of planting. So what we're showing here are 2 street trees. That's the big canopy tree that you see there. We still need to coordinate with Parks and Rec or Street Tree Advisory Committee regarding the best species. Currently, the designation is camphor tree, which is a broad canopy tree, but we're not necessarily tied to that, and nor is the city's urban forest superintendent, Nathan Slack. So that remains to be worked out, but the good news is that we have, you know, this very generous space and sort of this park-like environment that we can take advantage of along Santa Barbara Street. So at the bottom of the screen here, you'll see we have another additional component that we've added to the design, a little expanded plaza on the corner of Santa Barbara and Coda Street. So as Brian mentioned, you know, the signage, what was indicated there before was just kind of not quite thought through yet. And so we've added this little raised planter. We now have an opportunity for a bench and some improved signage there, in addition to expanding that enhanced paving, which now carries all the way down Santa Barbara Street into the corner. So another new element that we've added to the design are these tiled bench seats. So we have some images for that up on the upper left-hand side of the plan. But yeah, so you could zoom in there. So we just did some little sketches. I think there's been maybe some confusion about the boulder seating elements as well. And we thought, you know, how wonderful would it be to introduce some color and have the streetscape just feel so much more vibrant. So the boulder elements at the top, this is just a few ideas of how those could look and feel. Again, those are intended to serve a dual purpose. They're for seating, but also kind of a beautiful sculptural element, but more importantly, they are security bollards that will help protect the building. And then below that, we have our new tiled benches. And so the idea there was that we could have, you know, potentially some different designs. We could work with local artists, and this could be an opportunity to incorporate art into the project. But these are just some rough ideas for what those could look like. And that's, again, still a work in progress. And we look forward to your comments on that. So the benches.
Maybe we could move down to the plan along Coda real quickly before we finish here.
Yeah, so the benches will kind of march down Coda Street. So they start at the corner of Santa Barbara, and then you'll see those rectangles that are indicated in dark gray. Those are those benches. And so there's quite a few of them at our little parklet along Coda Street. That's the terminus of the Plaza Veracruz. And I believe that concludes my part of the presentation. So Brian, did you have anything else?
Okay, yeah. So Mr. Chair, all of the plans are available to you, perhaps as part of answering questions. We've got the elevations obviously to look at, but I wanted to do this presentation as timely as possible. So we'll just leave it there and be open for questions.
I appreciate that, but why don't we just go to the elevations really quickly?
Okay.
So everybody in the public can see them as well.
I think it's the sheet after the renderings, Mr. Bolton. Probably page 12. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, great.
So yeah, here, this is a good expression, I think, of how that tower has changed. And again, we've probably added about 5 or so feet to it, just so the proportion and have it stand out a little bit more. That was a recommendation of my good friend, Bill Mahan, which I think was a good one.
Okay. Thank you for that. And so let's go ahead and open public comment. If there's any member of the public that would like to address the board regarding this project, please raise your hand, follow the instructions on screen. Do we have anybody out there?
Thank you, Chair Moore. I do see a member of the public has raised their hand to speak on this item. Richard Clopton has his hand raised. I will unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chair Moore and board members. Hearing my name among today's commenters, you might logically think that I'll speak about story polls, as I wrote in a recent Newshawk opinion piece. I see that you've received multiple written comments on story polls as a result. I did not contact any of those writers, and I recognize only 3 of them. I'll add, though, that I don't remember the signage on site that Mr. Hess mentions were presented to the sign committee for approval. No, I want to comment on 3 remaining design comments or concerns initially brought up by the board members themselves. First is the treatment of the corner at Coda and Santa Barbara Streets. This most prominent portion of the building needs more work to combat the citadel appearance that is inherent to a large police building fitted into a too small parcel. One board member suggested it resembles a guard tower. This is never a good look for a department hoping to promote positive community discourse. Second is the issue of the still shaded public entrance on Santa Barbara Street. Not considering the solar exposure there throughout the year was an oversight. This makes the entrance uninviting and can be less convenient for the public's access from a one-way street. Moving that entrance to south-facing two-way Coda Street would solve those problems. Failing that, more attention should be given to stepping back the upper stories in the tower of the building and parking lot that loom over the official public entrance. Last is the still lifeless Coda Street face. This aspect should be developed into an absolute asset for the building. It is bright and southeast facing. It looks toward the ocean at a public park, a childcare center, and residences. It shares the block with a popular coffee house and National University campus. Reorienting the official department entrance to Coda Street would solve darkness criticism, provide a better connection to the active surrounding community, and be more convenient for department visitors. Further, if that rearrangement included the moving of the main department parking entrance to the shadier Santa Barbara Street, it would allow for more rapid deployment of service vehicles onto that one-way street. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else?
Thank you, Chair Moore. Another member of the public has raised their hand to speak on this item. Patricia Saley, I will unmute you, and then you'll have to unmute yourself, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak on this item. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm in favor of relocating the police station and building a new one to meet current and hopefully future needs. This is the first new city building downtown in over 30 years, and it is extremely important. This building must exemplify Santa Barbara, especially as it's immediately adjacent to EPV. I have notes from several ABR meetings on the project, and comments made by the public and the ABR members are still relevant, including, first, the building is too big for the site and needs to be stepped back more, especially at the Santa Barbara Coda corner and along Santa Barbara Street. As I understand it, about a dozen parking spaces have been removed, which is a good start, but the commercial space has not changed. No other applicant would be able to keep coming back with so little change to the overall program, given the comments made by the board. Second, the Coda Street elevation is too bland and needs more human scale and more activity, such as a public entrance. That would also solve the issue of the dark entrance proposed on Santa Barbara Street. And third, there is concern that this proposed building is not compatible with the park and the 1- and 2-story buildings across Coda and Santa Barbara Street. More needs to be done to have it fit into its neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Chair Moore, at this time, I do not see any other member of the public that has raised their hand to speak on this item. We did receive a fair amount of written correspondence. Mary?
Thank you, Christina and Chair Moore. We did receive 10 letters and they were distributed to the board before this hearing. Back to you.
Okay. And with that, we will close public comment and move on to questions from the board. Who would like to start? Vice Chair Six, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Moore. Mike, do we have, there they are. First of all, on the site plan on the public street frontage, it's a great move, but did the city did the city place restrictions on the extent of development in that new parkway area? I mean, could you have more structure, let's say walls, pilasters or whatever, announcing the entry out there in the 9'6" furnace, 9'6" frontage zone, or whatever it's called.
Chair Moore, Commissioner Six, we haven't talked to them specifically about restrictions. We're really thinking this is landscape. You can see that Courtney has added some of the sandstone elements out in that parkway, but certainly nothing more than that as far as we're concerned. You know, that they haven't indicated any specific restrictions.
Okay, thanks. Regards to the pocket park along Coda, again, has it been considered that the main public sidewalk could be within your property and therefore widen the parkway for, again, some significant canopy trees between the palms?
I don't know, Courtney, if you have any comments on that. I mean, I would hate to lose the foreground planting to the building there. I'm not sure. I believe the Coda Street street tree it's a type of pine, I believe. It's particularly prominent there, the next block. But in this case, we've got, the palm trees are pretty closely spaced. So I don't know if we'd have, we may have a couple of opportunities to add canopy trees there, which I think we'd be willing to do. I don't know if Courtney, you have any comments on that?
Sure, I have some comments. I mean, I think we could evaluate that, but the intent at this point was really to have that space be functional, which is why we brought functional, meaning, accessible. And so that's why we brought the hardscape out to the curb rather than maintaining a traditional parkway, which you see, elsewhere along Coda Street. I would be hesitant to introduce a broad canopy tree, in line with the existing palm trees. I think that would be a little odd, but, it's something to consider.
Okay, thanks. So did you, I won't ask that one. There a minor question on the Santa Barbara Street, on the main entry at the elevator tower. There is an exterior door. Is that a functional door?
Yes, that would allow someone who is going down to pick up items in the basement where all of the secure storage is. If they're going to get items that have been stolen or something like that and retrieve them, they could exit straight out of that elevator instead of having to go through the lobby.
Okay, and let's see. You mentioned that you lowered the trellis at the corner, just the trellis above the exercise porch on the corner. How far did you lower that?
I believe we lowered everything there about a foot. So those eaves and that trellis and everything got dropped about a foot.
Okay.
And in the process, we also extended the overhangs on those mansard roofs.
Were the mansard roofs there before?
Yes, they were. In our last review, they were. We not on the first review.
Okay. All right. The garage doors, will they be necessary to be solid, or will they be a lattice open type?
Yes, it's intended. I mean, there'll be a security gate there of some kind that is activated by staff in this particular entrance here. So it's not intended to be solid.
Okay. Well, I would ask the applicant team. I can see that, not having story poles could be a significant fly in the ointment at an appeal at City Council. Do you still feel that not putting story poles is the wisest path to take?
Well, Mr. Chair and Mr. Six, I can tell you that I feel strongly that story poles is not going to tell us anything that the renderings and the simulations don't tell you. This is a big building. No one is saying it's not. Story poles are, going to be sticks in the air.
Yes.
In some cases 53 feet tall, and they will accomplish, in my opinion, nothing to tell the story of this building, other than, be very difficult to erect and cause a impact to the farmer's market. So I think we've got better tools these days. I understand story poles when we're putting a hillside home up in the San Marcos foothills, or when a neighbor is going to be impacted by a second story addition, but in an urban setting, I frankly do not believe they are effective.
I thoroughly agree with you, but as you face an appeal, it will be a unfinished business that will muddy the waters, I feel.
Well, I will tell you that
the question is, you're okay with that?
Yeah, and I will say that the Planning Commission, across the board felt completely fine without story poles in their deliberations, as you know.
Okay. Thank you. That's my questions.
Okay, thank you. Who's next?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead. Is that you, Mr. Whalen?
Yes. One small question. Are the Lincoln School plaques existing on site currently?
Yes.
And where are they, please?
They're on the little MTD shuttle stop that is basically right there where we're going to be putting them back again along Coda.
All right. I think member 6 had all of my other questions. I have one small one relating to the windows. Apart from those, the drawings state that they'll be aluminum. Can you talk about the finish of those aluminum frames on the windows?
Well, I want them to look as traditional as possible. We did the windows at the old Saks Fifth Avenue, Penny's Crocker Bank building at State and Carrillo would be a good example to look at, where the frame has a beveled edge, just like a traditional steel window would have. We haven't really talked about color. It's possible that we could do a dark color of some kind, but I would want it to be a very elegant color, either a very dark green or something that might be in the bronze tone.
All right, thank you. That's all I have, Chair Moore.
Okay, I have a few questions. Speaking of windows, can you tell me a little bit more about the openings in the upper level of the parking garage? They come across as dark. What is going on in there?
We've got, if we blow that up, it's basically a grill pattern. So we still obviously need to develop what that design is, but it is some kind of a grill. We recently did a grill in the parking lot at down on State Street at the Harborview Inn expansion that's there on State and across the street from the new hotel. So this would be some kind of a grill. It might even be a couple of layers to create added dimensions, but right now that's just a placeholder in the model. Okay. But it will be open to allow for ventilation at that level.
Okay. Are you relying on these openings for your ventilation?
We are hoping to not have to mechanically ventilate the upper portions of the garage, yes. But obviously, in the case of the first floor, we have glass there. So these openings, I don't think we are dependent on these particular openings to meet the calculations for the open parking garage. So it's possible we could do something different than a wrought iron grill.
Okay, yeah, it'd be good to know if that's a, a must-have for ventilation. So maybe the next time we can discuss that more in detail. And then if we go around to I think it's the east elevation. Yeah. What are the sizes of the larger openings in the second and third levels as far as the window sizes?
Jeff, I don't know if you're on, if you know what those sizes are. I don't know. I'm guessing that those are 8-foot tall windows. So they're probably about 8 by 10, something like that.
I don't know off the top of my head, but just give me a second, Chair Moore, and I can tell you.
Okay. And then on the uppermost level, are those essentially floor to ceiling, or is there like a little 12-inch tall curb? I guess it's not floor to ceiling, but they're sitting on some low wall relative to the interior floor height.
Yes, but that they are, virtually floor to, ceiling or floor to 10 feet, something like that. But those are large windows.
Yeah. Okay. And then as we get over to the, I guess the entryway, is that essentially almost a 20-foot tall opening where at the front entry?
I'm guessing that that's even a little bit more than that. Is that's an 8-foot door. So it could be closer to 24 feet.
Okay. And then if we flip back around to the CODA side, waiting for Mr. Hornbuckle if he's got any info for us.
Not quite. Sorry about that.
Okay. No worries. Mr. Olson, you had some questions?
I do. Mr. Colonel, the last couple of times you've appeared before us, you've promised us some enlightening details, perhaps incorporating some elements on the eaves and other places that you alluded to. Will we see those sometime?
Yeah, Chair Moore, Commissioner Olson, absolutely. Let me explain to you where we are in the process. You reviewed the minutes from last time and we then went to the Planning Commission. We want to come back to you with the revisions that we have, but now we are going into the DART process. So the project has to be deemed complete and go through environmental review and then ultimately approved by the Planning Commission. What we want to do is try to get this project with you to where it's essentially close to being at a level for project design approval, with the understanding that we're going to be coming back many times to review detailing and specifics as we get into design development on the project. So if I'm not sharing any of those with you now, it's simply because we just still need to develop those details as we proceed with the design.
Great, thank you. I just think there's just great opportunities here for introducing art elements into the building, other than just the benches. So I'm eagerly waiting for your deft touch in those areas.
We agree.
Okay, anyone else with questions? Ms. Anderson, go ahead.
On the corner of Coda and Santa Barbara where you lowered the building, I didn't see an interior transition. So is the floor also going down, or are you going to see the edge of the floor through the glass?
The floor did not go down. The floor remained in the same location. We slightly lowered the parapet wall that basically encloses that upstairs deck space. So we just incrementally tried to scale it down slightly. So no, the floor did not change.
What are you going to be doing for the glass in that location?
You mean for the 911 call center in the corner?
Yes.
Well, that will have to be bulletproof glass. But the intent is for that to be, to look normal from a public standpoint. And that light is really important for the light coming into the 911 call center.
Yeah, I guess will it be frosted or clear, or do you guys know yet?
No, we do not want it to be frosted, but there will be, there will have to be sun control and privacy control in there. So the technicians in that call center will be able to control the opacity of the opening from the inside.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then Ms. Miller, I think you've mentioned this before, but what system of green roof are you guys proposing to use specifically on this corner above the exercise room?
Chair Moore, Board Anderson, thanks for that question. I think usually we use, I'm spacing on the name of the company, but we use a company that does pre-grown panels. So everything arrives, fully grown, and the panels are 1 by 2 foot, and you just set them down and call it a day. So lots of different details. It's called Live Roof. Thank you. You can do anywhere from 4 up to 8 inches deep for the soil. We've had a lot of success with those on our that remains to be detailed. So that's one idea, but we haven't committed to anything yet.
Okay. I think those are all my questions.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Black.
Yeah. Thank you. So, couple things as they relate to seating areas. The way that it's drawn on the site plan and the landscape site plan, it's labeled as boulders, but the way they're drawn, it looks like sort of rectilinear stone elements. And I'm just trying to understand. I mean, I saw your seating boulder elements. Is that the intent, or are they rectilinear, like a section of stone wall? Okay, more like the picture that I'm seeing in the upper left. Is that the
Board Member Black? Thank you for asking this question. I never have enough time to really elaborate on anything. So the intent is that we're taking a natural boulder in its original form and cutting it and then, sliding it. So some of them will just be decorative elements, and some you could sit on, which is what's shown in the first row here of those drawings. We also, in addition to these, have just natural boulders in the design as well. So there will be a combination of both.
Okay. And then my other question is the sort of seating area, I'll call it, down on Coda Street. I'm trying to understand, what is it about that location that motivated you to have seating there? I'm just trying to imagine, like, who's going to sit there? Is it just people passing down the block. There's no entrance there. I mean, I always think of benches as being appropriate around entrances to buildings where people can sit out and either wait to go in or wait for people to come out or wait to be picked up. And I'm just trying to understand what your intent is for that area. I mean, I realize it's a seating area, but are people really going to be using that? I only say that in the context of, you know, there's not, it's sort of, you diminish the amount of landscape opportunities when you have that much paving area there.
So Commissioner Black, I think the answer to that is one, it is the location for that Lincoln School Memorial. So we're keeping it in the same place. Two, we still don't know definitively whether MTD is going to keep that bus stop or not there. And we're trying to accommodate it so that it can remain. And that's one of the reasons that, you know, currently, as you know, that flagstone goes out to the back of curb. Right. And that's why we're extending the paving out. And then three, you know, we did, I don't know if you noticed, but the building we did on the corner of State and Coda, the Cost Plus building, we put a little bench on the side of that building. And I'm amazed at how many times I drive by there and see people sitting on that bench. And it's not near the entrance. It's just kind of a nice little spot, and it has been identified. I mean, this is the sunnier side of the building. So we think that there is an opportunity. But I think that the comment about the public art and activating this space so that people do feel comfortable here. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that, you know, that we talked about this at the Planning Commission. We really haven't had a chance to talk to you all about this, but you know, there's a lot of activity that happens in and around a police station, like for instance, a Craigslist drop off, or where, you know, parents may, you know, exchange children, or, you know, that are in whatever that happens, where it's a safe environment, but it isn't necessarily, you know, right there in the public realm. So this might be part of what happens in this area. And obviously, I haven't emphasized it, but we now have windows on the street here. Not only do we have the fleet bicycle unit that is going to have windows and in looking down onto that, but also this IT function as well.
Okay, good. No further questions. Thank you for that answer.
Okay, just a follow-up from me. On the sidewalk paving in this area, I noticed that there's an area that's of sidewalk that's still white. Is that going to be replaced, or is that to remain as is? And then what's the, I guess, design strategy for the special paving on Santa Barbara Street that stops as it wraps the corner? What's going on with that?
Chair Moore, I think, yes, the white sidewalk would indicate essentially a standard concrete sidewalk. I suppose Public Works may want to have portions replaced, and if they do, they probably are going to want it replaced with, you know, permeable concrete. But Courtney, I'll let you answer the question on what you've thought in terms of the paving where we are showing it.
Thanks, Brian. What Brian said is correct. The white area is intended just to be existing sidewalk to remain here. And, you know, it would just be natural gray concrete. Elsewhere, we're proposing, I think, a permeable paver. We haven't identified a specific product or module yet. What's shown there looks like a linear shape in a running bond pattern, but that remains to be studied. The big move in the design is just to have these sort of bold stripes that are oriented true north, which help kind of direct people towards the entrance to the building, and they work in concert with the bolder elements as well. So that's
Can you zoom out so you can see the...
You can see that more clearly at the entrance plaza and how that relates to the parking area as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, Courtney, you are showing that pavement pattern going up the new sidewalk on Santa Barbara Street. by the way.
Right, but then it stops at some point.
It would
driveway.
stop, at the curb cut.
So it extends all the way up. It's, part of that entrance plaza. And then it extends out into the parking area, but then it transitions back to your standard gray, concrete sidewalk after you cross the driveway going north.
Does anyone else have any questions before we move into comments? Ms. Anderson, go ahead.
Yes, regarding story poles, is there any talk of like using virtual reality or augmented reality, and as in like goggles for someone to stand on the street and see it, maybe as an alternative?
We haven't talked about that. I'm not sure what programs that would entail. It may certainly be possible, but I do think the postings that are on the site now were intended to at least notify the public and provide that resource. But it's not impossible for us to potentially create some of these 3D renderings that would also be digitally available on the site, whether we put a couple of TV monitors up or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Good suggestion. Something maybe city can look at in the future. All
Sure.
right. So
if you'd like them.
Sure.
So on the Santa Barbara Street elevation, if we want to flip to that, I think it's page. Yeah, there you go. So the large openings on the second floor below the mansard roof, those are 9-foot tall windows, and the sill is at 2 feet above the second floor. So the head is at 11 feet. And then the windows up at the third floor, the two windows at the corner, the head of those windows are at 10 feet, and those are 8-foot tall windows. So the sill is 2 feet above the finished floor there.
Okay, so they're 10, 12 feet wide then?
The width, the windows at the third floor are 13 feet wide, and the windows at the second floor are, oops.
They look like they're 12 feet, Jeff.
Yeah, I believe they are.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to comments, please. So, who would like to start? Vice Chair 6, go ahead.
My mouse was upside down, so I couldn't press the speaker button. So I think that what I see are very good improvements and responses to our concerns. I think that, to address one of the consistent public concerns and really one of my concerns from the very beginning was the building entry facing the North Minor Street and missing the Sunny Coda connection with the park. But however, the addition of the new parkway along Santa Barbara Street, I think really helps me be more acceptable of the basic arrangement. So I think that is a great improvement and makes the entry as positioned much more palatable. However, I think as I alluded in my question, I know that most of it should be landscape, but I think that there should be explored some kind of more formal architecture, such as freestanding bollards of sandstone or whatever right at the entry in lieu of or in addition to the palm tree alley to announce to further announce the entry within that new added landscape area in the street. As far as the pocket parks along Coda, I'm just wondering, questioning whether that hardscape will really be usable as used as anticipated in maybe less landscape, less hardscape and more significant. They don't have to be full-blown trees, but more significantly high, denser landscape in lieu of some of that hardscape. I think that as far as fenestration, I've said this again. I know that it's early, and I hear aluminum. I'm just wondering if some of these, I don't mind the bigger openings and the taller openings in the lobby, some of the bigger openings in that second floor as we measured, as it was announced, measured, but is there, I'm thinking of the fenestration finesse of the big windows at the library or the big windows at the retail building at State Street in Canon Perdido. I think it was Forever 21 for a while. Is there a way to introduce some very articulate major divisions and sculpture to the mullions and this bring very a lot of elegance and detail to these windows. And maybe if aluminum has to be, I can understand the use of aluminum, but is there a way to interrupt the aluminum windows with some very ornate, very finessed and traditional sculptural elements to the fenestration? If we look here at the IT portion, and I appreciate that improvement, the IT improvements, I'm wondering if that particular segment of the elevation could be more of a similar to the exercise corner where there are expressed columns and maybe even a wood lintel rather than again and again having, the windows punched in the white wall. I think there's an opportunity here, the way you've introduced that particular portion, to do something very different rather than windows punched in the white wall. And as long as we're on this elevation, I think that there could be a little more punch to the parapets, more significance, molding and so forth on the parapets on the garage, maybe more gusto, more differential, or more heavy in one area, more difference and so forth. I think that's a little anemic at this point. And as long as we're on this, I hope that the latticed garage door, it would be very nice on both garage door openings to find a very decorative and maybe even semi-custom roll-up. I know that's difficult, but it would be very nice to have something very traditional and decorative in that product. If we can back out, I have something in mind here that I'm still uncertain about, but would like feedback from all. If we zoom in on particularly the middle east elevation, suppose there was a color differentiation in the box and cascading down from the top mansard roof. So the third story and where the third story planes are continuous, like in between the elevator on the right, left-hand side of the elevator, if there was a color difference there, would this begin, I think, you know, I grimace about having a multicolor building, but I think it's worth exploration and discussion to see if a darker color would break this up better and recede that third story for massing apparent massing purposes. As long as we're on this elevation, I don't know whether extending the roof eaves on these lower mansard roofs on the second floor are, you know, the best thing to do. If perhaps if there is no eave and there is a significant decorative patterned molding frieze below it, it would be much different and differentiate itself from the upper mansard eave treatment, and it wouldn't stick out further in and overhang into the visual space as people are looking up. A couple other minor things. If we look at the south elevation, just think that the hat on the stair tower there, it could stand a, you know, I don't want to get cutesy with this building, but is there a way to include a decorative corner chimney such as the, I would assume, workable chimney at the far left to break up this hat? And I'm thinking that my last comment, I think, is on the, I'm hoping that with the exercise trellis on the corner, that the undersides of that wood structure would be highly painted and decorated and have a very fun, colorful resolution. I think other than that, oh, and as far as story poles, you know, I was about to say, let's do story poles just to get it out of the way and not have it in front of a possible appeal at city council, but I'm still committed to the idea that story poles just don't provide the best tool to evaluate the overall compatibility of this building, and that the public, general public, and specific members of the public should carefully review the photo sims and the tools that are available and get a much better idea of its impact than story poles would. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to, Mr. Olson, go ahead.
Yes, I very much appreciate the changes that Mr. Canal has made. I think that they are very helpful and successful in bringing this building into some of the into the building that this board appreciates. I think these changes to the south side are effective. And since the beginning of the elevation of the parking garage, these are just a significant difference, and I think quite successful. I'm also happy to see the inclusion of the parking area on Santa Barbara Street. I just think that that helps bring our attention around, in as much as we're not going to get a main entrance on the south elevation. These changes on the Santa Barbara Street side help us direct our attention over there to that entry, and I think that's important. I've always thought that the palm trees were effective of also doing that. I think that's also successful. I have one exception to the items that have been changed, and that's the tower. For my way of looking at this, it doesn't fit. It just seems so much to me like you just can't have a proper building in Santa Barbara if it doesn't have a tower stuck on it someplace. And so that's the one exception I have to my appreciation for the building. It's coming along quite nicely. And again, I look forward to the details and the incorporation of art wherever it's possible into the building. As to the benches, as a person who has just remodeled the benches in front of my building so that people can't camp out on them and sleep on them, which was pretty much what's happening every night in front of our building. Just to remind you that you shouldn't make those sleeping size. Oops. So let's see what else I have. I think the sliced stones is a very good idea. I'm quite impressed with that element too. I think that's one of the distinctive parts of this building to make it really something unusual. And I think I hope that progresses. It looks quite promising. That's all my comments.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Mr. Black, go ahead.
I'd agree with most of the comments that have been made. I do hope that the city will push to have MTD have a stop there. I think, one, it gives that seating area sort of a reason for being, and I just think it's very convenient location, and would really add to that part of the streetscape. But I guess my general comment is, and this is not specific, but I think it's important that Ms. Miller sort of really be sensitive to sort of the size, bulk, and scale of the building, and have the landscape work with it accordingly. More specifically, more verticality as far as the street, the trees are concerned along both street frontages. I think just to sort of soften the overall height and mass of the buildings. I mean, you have some of that there, but I just want you to be cognizant of it. We have a great opportunity, obviously, on Santa Barbara Street now with that additional landscaper, and I think that's going to help. So maybe it's just on CODA that you're going to have to look for opportunities to get, some upright tree massing in various locations along that elevation. So, but otherwise, I think the building's quite handsome, and it's really come a long way since the beginning. I really appreciate the efforts of the design team. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Mr. Whalen, do you have any comments? Go ahead.
Sure. I was going to defer to Ms. Anderson, but I'll jump right in. I too appreciate the articulation of the massing as it's developed from the original plans. it's getting closer and closer to something that I think I could strongly support, especially in regards to the entry law that's opened up quite nicely. I would encourage the designers to reconsider the shape and the volume at that corner to both reduce the size and bulk and add some importance to that intersection and to relate to those neighbors, those other three neighbors there. The tower is improving. The top is well articulated and I think benefits from the additional height, but somehow it still lacks a thoughtful integration into the massing. And I'm thinking specifically of the tower at the courthouse and the tower at the Arlington Theater. The designers may wish to consider the idea that of a traditional column, that it has a base, a shaft, and a capital. And especially the base should have a better relationship to the pedestrian experience. And this is very carefully illustrated in the urban design guidelines. And that service door, or the special service door at the base, it needs a surround, molding, some sort of definition. And the door itself, it has to be a very special pedestrian experience, even though nobody but the police department is going to use it. It should be finely crafted and carefully detailed, and a lot of attention needs to go into that door. I feel very strongly about that. As member 6 mentioned, the garage doors, the one on Coda is much more important than the one on Santa Barbara Street, which is really just going to recede into the background. But those doors are going to be very, very important to the pedestrian experience. Now, there are a lot of windows in this building. It's really a building of windows, and there are lots of different kinds and shapes. I'm wondering if a little more rigor as to the size used in this different layouts in the windows wouldn't bring some more order and refined character to the building. I would fall into the camp that I think the second-story windows on the Santa Barbara Street are just a little bit too big, and perhaps even the third-story ones. But I could change from that position. The battered window sills, I think, are a very, very nice touch. They add to this illusion of thick masonry walls. However, that battered sill, it doesn't have some sort of special treatment of tile or something else, is really going to collect a lot of dirt and make the building look unduly messy without a lot of maintenance. So I would like to see some care devoted to that. I assume that there are going to be closed circuit TV cameras all over this building, and I would like to see where they're located and how they're thoughtfully integrated into the design. As we're beginning now to see light fixtures on the building, these cameras are, I'm going to think, going to be an important part of a unified design rather than just stuck on at the last minute. And then turning to the landscape, the public assembly area, the public parking stalls at the entryway. Well, in a general sense, I think the landscape reflects a contemporary point of view, as was originally presented in the first design. While the building design has moved decidedly more towards the Santa Barbara element, the landscape design, at least as I see it, really is more of a contemporary nature. And the diagonal paving, I think, could be revised to reflect more traditional patterns that we find, say, on State Street or in other examples of other cities. the diagonal just really doesn't work that well, especially on the corner where I don't think it works to develop a corner attitude that we're all seeking. And then as a very minor point, this paving pattern should include the delineation of the parking stalls. Please don't paint the stalls right on the paving patterns. There are many ways that you could do this without paint. I'm wondering if the flagpole is properly located and wouldn't be obscured by the palm trees. I'm sure you can work that out. Let's see, what else do I have here? I do like the idea of these split stone benches and the tile benches too, very much so. But again, and it's not to say I wouldn't use the split bench. It's just that, again, it ties into that diagonal premise that the entire layout is based upon. And I have some reservations about that being used. Let's see. Oh, yes, the signage. Now, the sandstone boulders, while they have an appeal, they seem to have generated the low sandstone walls for the signage. And if we're going to use stone, let's see it used more comprehensively throughout rather than just to feature the signage. And frankly, this signage is just it's just begging for vandalism. It seems to me the signage needs to be up and on the building and protected. It will also be of a greater visibility. And the signage wall at the vehicular entry on Santa Barbara Street, perhaps you consider putting it on the other side of the street, so other side of the driveway, that is, so that one sees it and knows in time that you should turn in. I realize at that point you're kind of stuck and really need to use some monument signage, but the overall use of the walls in those locations and the Lincoln School, I would just like to see a little more stone threaded throughout the design. And I would certainly support the idea of a bus stop coming at your little parklet to make that a complete assembly. A question that I missed, it doesn't appear that there's any bicycle parking for the public. I may have missed that, so in a subsequent presentation, I would like to see where what's going to happen to that. And then finally, I really don't support the use of story poles on this site for this project due to the farmers market impact, and that I truly believe that better tools for this issue are available. Thank you, Chair Moore. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Anderson, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I'm having a difficult with this design just because there's nothing that sets it apart from other Santa Barbara style architecture. But that being said, I think the applicant has come back with some great movement toward to respond to our comments. And I agree with a lot of the comments that have been mentioned. For example, over the IT new location, maybe studying a new roof there that might match the corner. Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see, my own comments, my own perspective are that I do appreciate the effort that the design team has made to hide and disguise the garage as much as possible. So I appreciate that move. I feel like that the comments that were made about the sandstone becoming a little bit more integrated throughout the project are appropriate. I think, and just stepping back as a whole, we need to remember that this site is directly adjacent to El Pueblo Viejo territory. So I think we need to respect that issue. And to that end, I would encourage the team to really go further in that direction. And these window openings that are, rectangular or more horizontal in orientation, I think are counter to the more traditional Santa Barbara style, where these openings would have been in thick bearing walls and wouldn't have been this wide. So I would encourage the team to look at even the examples at the current post office on Anacapa Street. Those openings are large, but they are vertical in format and proportion. And the library as well, they're very large openings, but vertical. And that also kind of strikes at the heart of a more Santa Barbara style, would be to have a greater wall to window ratio, I guess I would call it. So this is, I understand it's more of an office building kind of a scenario, so you do want lots of light coming in there, and I don't want to limit the number of windows, but I think just the proportion of window to wall plane is a little off. So I think more wall would be more in line with a El Pueblo Viejo style building. I support the addition of the street furniture and those elements, the little pocket park. I think that's great. I would support more of that. That is what our urban design guidelines call for, more integration and detail at the public level to activate the streetscape. So I would encourage further study of tiled areas and sandstone areas along the base that are integrated with more public amenities. The paving materials, I know it's early on for that, but they're depicted as a gray material. I think those should be a little bit warmer in tone, so it's a little closer to a more traditional Santa Barbara style. So those are my comments. Does anybody have any follow-up? No? Okay, so we need a motion. This is, there's no appealable action today, so it would be a continuance. But we want to try and give them some feedback. Go ahead, Vice Chair Six.
I'm about to prepare a motion, but I think we've had significant, a lot of comments here, and I've kind of organized some things that I think we need to show of hands of.
Okay.
Like, I did have, and I don't want my individual comments to be written into the minutes without more support. I suggested perhaps studying a darker color on the wall planes on the fourth floor. Does, a bicolor thing that would of a darker color on that third floor and down the flush plains, some of them extending all the way down to the ground floor. Does anybody have any excitement or see that as a comment worthy?
Mr. Six?
Yes.
Rather than a different color, I would think a different tone of the same color might do what you want, might accomplish what your intention is, without turning it into sort of a pastel-y composition.
I could support that. Do we need to take a, hear everybody on that, Mr. Chair Moore, or how do you want to organize this?
I think for some of these, yeah, a straw vote would be a good thing to do.
Mr. Six, I think that texture could come into play on your suggestion also. A change of texture.
Okay, so I'm hearing a more subtle than an aggressive color change would be acceptable. Do we need a show of hands on that idea?
Sure. So what members could support a change of color tone and or texture on, we'll leave it open on varying areas of the building? Let's see a show of hands.
Okay.
All right.
Everybody.
Okay, I will read in, I think that we should be soft with that and have the applicant study.
Yes.
I heard another show of hands on, is there too much glass versus window? And I'd be interested, before I read something into the minutes in that regard.
So the ratio of window opening to wall area, is that what you mean?
Yes.
How do we want to frame that? Is there too much, or is it appropriate, or how do you want to frame it?
I've assumed that was part of the program because they do seem inordinately large, and perhaps the applicant had a reason from the program to size those windows in that way.
I'm sure he would just like to have as much light in there as possible. So that's understandable. But let's get back. So the question is, how do you want to frame it? Vice Chair Six?
I think that maybe we could avoid, maybe it's too broad. Maybe we should say, do all board members support the idea of restudying some of the larger windows on the third floor and portions of the second floor to be more traditional as in proportion and ratio to wall? Is that a clear question? No.
Okay. Well, yeah, let's just be specific about it, like you suggested. How many board members would support restudying the largest windows in the third and second floor areas?
On the east elevation.
On east and there's a little bit on the south.
Yes.
On third floor.
Okay, see the show of hands, please. 4. So that's a yes.
Okay. I didn't support it because I think that if there was a lot of finesse, as I mentioned, to the fenestration, it would cure them. But I support the direction of the board. Also in green, I have that some members do not like and feel that the tower is not integrated with the building. So my hands would ask the question, is the tower for the most part acceptable with some refinement? Is that a good, clear question? Okay.
Yeah. So we got, let's leave the hands up so we can count them. We got, leave your hands up. So we have 4. Okay, so that's a yes.
Okay. And then I had another personal one here. The pocket park on the south elevation, I suggested that less hardscape and more significant planting. Is that something that resonates with the rest of the board? The specific question would be, should the hardscape at the pocket park be reduced and replaced with more significant high planting? Yes.
I think that should be studied, definitely.
Okay. 2.
2
I hear 2. Nobody else? Okay. All right, I think that's it. So if I may craft a motion that, you know, the improvements, well, the changes since last time are very positive and moving toward a very fine design. The Planning Commission acceptance of the height was based on the understanding that this would be an exemplary building and that it's moving toward that. And the board looks forward to seeing the refinements and especially in the Spanish tradition. Number 2, the addition of planting along Santa Barbara Street in the parking zone is very positive and helps mitigate the northeast position of the entry, and that the applicant should study further landscape structures such as sandstone pilasters or bollards in the area directly in front of the entry in that newly acquired area to enhance the identification of the entry. That the applicant should study the proportions and sizes relative to the surrounding walls of the larger window masses on the 2nd and 3rd floors on the east and south elevation. That sandstone, the applicant should find opportunities to provide stone that uses of stone more integrated into the building. I think that one's clear. Looking forward to confirmation that a bus stop will be included along Coda. That the tower as designed with continuing refinement, such as lowering the, what is that? The plinth to a more pedestrian scale. That other than minor refinements, that the tower is acceptable and integrated with the building. That the landscape, and especially the hardscape around the building, should approach more traditional design. For example, the diagonal patterning of brickwork should be more axial. The board appreciates the improvements and introduction of interest and real activities at the south elevation of the garage. One board member suggests that the facade section of the IT be developed into more of a column and lintel expression. One board member also, one board member feels that the parapets along the parking garage elevation should be beefed up, more differential and heavier. One board member suggests that something happened to the simple hat on the south elevation air tower to be penetrated by some chimney or some other device to add interest. I don't think I mentioned that every effort should be made to either find a unique product or custom design. The garage roll-up door on Coda especially. Oh, and lastly, that the majority of the board continues to advocate that the mass bulk and scale simulations, models, flybys are far superior than story polls, and will not demand story polls for this project. If, I think that's the end of my list, if I've forgotten anything.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Olson. Any discussion?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Williams.
I'd like to suggest perhaps another straw vote that the applicant study the massing of the corner element to better acknowledge its importance to the site and also to enhance the character of the pedestrian activities of the intersection.
I will support that. I think that, yeah, maybe it's introducing a half railing or some kind of more decorative column. Of course, he's already lowered, but yeah, I'll fervently support that general comment.
Thank you. It could be, what I'm thinking of is a different volumetric shape that relates better to the intersection.
Mm-hmm.
But just to further study that in lieu of the comments we received from the public and also the board member comments.
All right. So I think if Mary got that, I think we leave it as a general comment. Is that correct, Dennis?
That would be fine, Mr. Six.
Okay, and further, I really liked your comment on the sign, the corner signage being relocated to avoid vandalism, etc., and better use of materials.
And these two things might go hand in hand. A redesign of the corner element might feature signage appropriately.
Let's separate the motion to say,
yes,
restudy the corner element, and a separate motion to restudy location and materials for a corner signage on the corner.
Very good.
Okay, does the seconder of the motion accept that change?
Agreed.
Okay. Any other discussion?
No, we read back the motion.
Okay, if that's the end of the discussion, let's read that back, please.
All right, so give me one moment. So the motion is to continue indefinitely with the following comments. Number one, the changes since the last meeting are very positive and moving toward a very fine design. The Planning Commission's acceptance of the height was based on the understanding that this would be a contemporary building and the project is, I'm sorry?
Exemplary.
Thank you. So the Planning Commission's acceptance of the height was based on the understanding that this would be an exemplary building and the project is moving towards this idea. The board looks forward to seeing refinements, especially in the Spanish tradition. Number two, the addition of planting along Santa Barbara Street in the parking zone is very positive and helps mitigate the northeast vision of the entry. The applicant should study further landscape structures such as sandstone pilasters or bollards in the area directly in front of the entry.
Mary?
Yes.
Mary? And it's just the northeast position of the entry.
Okay. So number three, the applicant shall study the proportions and sizes relative to the surrounding walls of the larger window masses on the second and third floors on the east and south elevation. Number 4, the applicant shall find opportunities to provide stone that is more integrated into the building. Number 5, the board looks forward to confirming that a bus stop will be included along Coda Street. Number 6, the tower as designed with the continuing refinement, such as lowering the plinth to a more pedestrian scale, is acceptable and integrated with the building. Number 7, the landscape, especially the hardscape around the building, shall approach a more traditional design. For example, the diagonal patterning of brickwork shall be more axial. Number 8, the board appreciates the improvements and the introduction of interest in real activities at the south elevation of the garage. One board member suggests that the facade section of the IT be developed into more of a column and lintel expression. One board member feels that the parapets along the parking garage elevation should be made more heavy and differential. And one board member suggests that something should happen to the simple half on the south elevation stair tower to be penetrated by a chimney or another device that adds interest. Number 9, every effort should be made to find either a unique product or custom design for the garage roll-up door. Number 10, the majority of the board continues to advocate that the mass bulk and scale simulation models, flybys, etc., are far superior than story poles and the board will not demand story poles for this project. Number 11, the applicant shall study the massing of the corner element in order to better acknowledge its importance to the site and enhance the character of pedestrian activities of the intersection. And lastly, number 12, the corner signage should be studied to be relocated in order to avoid vandalism and a better use of materials.
Sounds good. Did we miss anything?
I don't believe so. Let's take our vote.
All right, I'll go ahead and start with Chair Moore.
Yes.
Vice Chair Six.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
can I ask one question first? Kathy Kennedy, planner, are you, the motion was continued indefinitely, so are you expecting it to come back before it goes to Planning Commission? Or not? I think if you're like some clarification on that. Are you sending it along?
I think that's up to the applicant if they want another pass to address some of these comments, or if they're comfortable moving ahead.
Yeah, I think it is up to them too, but if you are ready to not have them come back, you could say continue definitely to Planning Commission. And that way you're letting them know that they could move forward, but if they want to, they could come back under that as well.
Chair Moore, I think that is I would let them go to Planning Commission if they so desire before coming back. Do we need to articulate does the board feel that way?
Yes.
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 I think it's up to them how they want to process their application.
Okay, I think
Yeah,
that's the,
Mr. Chair, if I could just comment, I mean, I think that I appreciate the comments. I think a lot of these comments are very, are getting into the detail of the building, which we're going to spend a lot of time on as we proceed. And, ultimately, we've obviously got to come back to you for project design approval. So I think we're going to want to address at least some of these comments. For example, the large fenestrations, I think, will want to be addressed before project design approval. But I do hope the board is willing to work with us, realizing that, some of this, like the design of the underside of the trellis.
Mr. Canal, but So we're behind, so I'm gonna need to speed us along. So do you want to return to the board, or do you want to be sent to the next step?
Well, I think we'd like to be sent to the next step.
Okay, great.
Chair Moore, I would revise my motion to say indefinite continuance to the Planning Commission.
Okay, does the seconder of the motion accept that?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. So we are about to take our votes. Let's do that.
All right, we'll go ahead and start with Chair Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Six,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Block,
Yes.
Board Member Olson,
Yes.
and Board Member Whalen.
Yes, and really good job on listing those concerns, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. The motion passes.
Okay, thank you. All right. And with that, we're on to item number 3, which is 1911 De La Vina Street, which is here for final approval. And this is a proposal for a mixed-use remodel. Project entails remodeling multiple facades of the existing 5,500 square foot, one-story non-residential structure. Also proposed is an internal reconfiguration of the structure from office and laundromat space to an art studio and laundromat. Project proposes site improvements and a parking lot and vehicular circulation improvements. Accessory dwelling unit will be permitted under a separate permit above a new 6-vehicle tandem carport. Scope of work also entails landscaping improvements. No change to the existing single unit is proposed. Final approval is requested. Project requires compliance with the following guidelines: the urban design guidelines, outdoor lighting design guidelines. Okay, and this project requires substantial conformance to the plans that received PDA on March 8th. Okay. That we have our applicant, yes, and then we have our motion, continue indefinitely. Study the continued development of the entry element to approximate materials and imagery commonly associated with the Spanish colonial revival with a modern take. Approval shall be conditioned upon inclusion of a street tree located in the right of way. Type and location shall be in consultation with the city arborist. Okay. We have our applicant team. Sorry we're running late. And take us through your project, please.
Yes, Chair Moore, members of the board, my name is Michael Holliday, the architects for the project with DMHA, and Courtney Miller is our landscape architect. Also, Chair Moore, those comments were from the previous board meeting. You may want to review the ones that were from the March the 8th meeting, because we pretty much addressed all those in our last go-round.
Yes, he's correct.
That is correct. Can we put up the last comments?
Chair Moore and board members, I apologize. I believe I picked the wrong minutes from the meeting previously. If you give me a minute, I can look them up and read them in. One moment.
Okay.
Chair Moore, if you'd like, I can read them. I have them here, unless you want to wait.
Well, let's just wait and get it.
Just a comment to the board. I appreciate the thoughtful and extra, 60 minutes of time it took to go over that. Was really interesting to watch from our side. So good job, guys and ladies.
Thank you, Chair Moore. I have the minutes pulled up now from the March 8th meeting. The motion was project design approval for return to the full board with comments. Comment 1, the board would like to see at least the signature front lighting fixture to be a more traditional style than what it is currently proposed. Thank you, Mr. Bolton. Number 2 is the project compatibility analysis criteria.
Right. That looks more accurate. Okay, so should be fairly straightforward. Can you walk us through your changes?
Yes, Chair Moore, members of the board. Let's go to the sheet 1. I think we've all spent some time over this, so I'm not, essentially what we're presenting to you today is almost exactly what you guys approved at PDA with some few sort of refinements and modifications. If we could go to sheet A204, which is number 38 in the PDF, if you're scrolling through. Yeah, 204, next. There you go. This, just to remind everybody, these are the exterior elevations. Essentially what we're presenting to you today is the same project. With a few refinements, and I want to sort of describe those. If we go to AS 102, architectural site plan, it should be number 22 in your PDF. Yeah, and then let's zoom in on the front entry there. We found out on the lower right-hand corner, there's some refinements that actually sort of came out of this. One was the blind kind of corner condition that was existing from people walking out the front door out into that roadway. I don't know if you've got ability to have a pointer or something, but essentially, yeah, right where the end of the driveway there, if you go over to the front entrance, yeah, and to that opening there, right there. Yeah, we were concerned that people walking out there would be walking right out into a one-way traffic flow. So one of the things we've done is introduced a 1-inch twisted steel wrought iron, kind of a graphite black series of bars that actually leave the opening there for proportion and sort of overall massing and design, but also kind of block that area off. And another issue that was brought up with civil engineering is water. And this is in a traditional sort of low area, and water flows right down from De La Vina down into that area there. So we have a little 6-inch curb that kind of protects from water flow flooding in the building, which over the years has been a problem. They've actually had to put sandbags there on the front of the building many times. The other issue, and this also mitigates truncated domes having to be at that area, which we really didn't want to try to lay on the project. The other sort of concern was towards the front. We introduced a low curve planter area. And I don't know if you can see that, yeah, right there, that's a new element that buffers that little outdoor laundry and patio, and also addresses some of the board members' comments for adding some additional landscape in that area. So that's a new planter area, but it also, it separates the driveway from the front entry, and also is a 6-inch curb there. So it kind of captures that water and channels it down the street. And we were able to introduce a trench drain right there at the front entry to address some flooding issues. So those are some new issues. The other sheet would be A202. Look at that one real quick. I'm just highlighting the changes since you saw this last time.
Yes. Oops.
Yeah, so we can dial into the exterior elevations here just a little bit more. If you look at the elevation number 2 there in the middle, 02, this is essentially the same design. The only thing that's incorrect here is that planter is not on the right-hand side, is 6 inches tall. It's not all the way up at the front. I will show you the light fixture here. That was what the question was, what does that light fixture look like? We think we've come up with a good sort of traditional mix for this building, but that elevation essentially is what you approved during PDA. The elevation above, just to show you what we've done, yeah, to the front and over to the left-hand side.
yeah, indicates those twisted wrought iron steel bars with the 6-inch curb to keep the water out of there. So the proportion and scale and massing of that whole element is the same, except for the sort of misleading height of that planter, which to the far left is only 6 inches high instead of, you know, up at the scale of the sort of plinth that the element sits on. The last two elements would be go to sheet G010, which is slide number 8. G010, up near the front. Yeah, here we go. Just to show you these light fixtures. Essentially, we kept the sort of traditional light fixture number 1 down there at the bottom. I'll zoom in on that a little bit. This is the fixture that we have in the back, which kind of highlights the bulb and just provides a little bit of sort of luminescence around the front entry. It's in a graphite black kind of color to match the rest of the building. And if you go to the upper fixture, they were able to match that. Well, yeah, let's go to the number 2. I can show you where these are on the elevation, but just let's look at them all since they're here. Number 2 is a surface mount fixture that has an uplight and a downlight component, and this is underneath the eave. So when we look at this walkway, it's going to have an uplight, sort of a glowing effect, and then a downlight component. So, and these can only go underneath the roofed areas because we can't have any uplights. But this similar design, very clean. All the finishes will match the same graphite black. The light fixture above is the one the board asked about, and where it's an exact larger example of the fixture that's on the side. This one is 20 inches. It's a decorative glazed fixture. So this, and it's actually shown in scale on the computer rendered Revit file. So we can look at those if you've got any questions in more detail. And then the light fixture above it is a ceiling mounted fixture that's a little 6-inch square that just downlights where we have this wall that projects out into the hallway, and the wall mounted sconces won't work too well. So the only other thing that we wanted to show you is sheet A203, and then I'm gonna let Courtney talk a little bit about the landscaping. Yeah, this want to kind of zoom in on the exterior. We had initially, we loved the idea of a corrugated metal fencing that was going to go all the way around the project here. One of the problems in this area is graffiti. And so we're still going to stay with the corrugated metal, and we love the rust colored, but it's probably going to be a painted finish. And we've been actually able to find a flat painted color that matched a Cor-Ten rust finish. Because especially where this actually when it gets tagged, it's very difficult, as you guys know, to kind of match that rust colored finish. But also where this sits, there's a few places on the lower elevation there where the metal was sitting on top of a plaster wall, and the client's really concerned about stains and rusting. So it's going to be the same finishes. It's just going to be a Cor-Ten rust colored paint color, flat finish to match a rust color. And let's go to the next elevation right above that. The trash, yeah, right there. The trash and recycled doors would have the same finish. That is not shown here. So there's a few things we rushed to get this done. Really appreciate you guys moving this forward, but quickly. But those are the changes that we want to make. They've already been made on our set, but we had to submit this a week ago to you guys. So with that, Courtney, I'll let you step in and talk about the decking, pavers, and boardwalk pavers, and then the landscape, because essentially this is the landscape has been refined a bit to address some of the stormwater management plan issues.
Thanks, Michael. If Mr. Bolton could go to, I think it's page 22 in the plan set. Sorry, 28. Okay, so basically what you see here is our construction level planting plan. As Michael mentioned, we made some minor refinements to the site, but in general, what you see here is what we presented the last time. the refinements that were made were just us coordinating with the civil engineer to refine the locations of the permeable paving. So as Michael mentioned, we made some refinements at the front of the building and then also in the rear of the property, but it was just minor tweaks here and there. So you may not even notice the difference. But the other thing we did do at the front is, as Michael mentioned, we added that little planter at the front, northeast corner of the building, which I think, when we looked at this, we really were trying to avoid the federal yellow, detectable warning right at the front of the building, which we always are. So this was our way of getting around that, but also creating a safer environment for people here. Right now, you can just kind of walk across the driveway all up and down this side of the building. And so now we're sort of controlling that access and directing people out towards the sidewalk. We did also introduce some more unique planting here. We have the Strelitzia gentiana, which is the narrow-leafed bird of paradise. And we wanted something that was a little more upright and had some color. So you'll see that there. It's the symbol with the square in the middle of it. And then otherwise, we just made some refinements to the elevated planter with the cousin it acacias, just to accommodate the location of the backflow assembly, which if you're looking at the plan, it's at the bottom where the 19 ACA COU call out is. There's exactly, thank you. We peeled back the planter a little bit there so that we could get the backflow assembly in at the ground level and still hopefully screen it with planting so that's not visible from the street. So it's sort of tucked behind that planter. And then otherwise, I think if you could navigate to our construction plan, which might be the plan right before this, sheet 27. So this is our hardscape layout plan. As I mentioned, minor refinements to the extent of the pavers, but we still have a herringbone pattern with a 4x8 module size in the driveway area. And then we have a linear plank paver in the walking surface areas adjacent to the building. And both of those are, if you scroll to the top of the page, Mr. Bolton, we still have the images on the plan. So this is the same thing you saw the last time, 4x8 at the top, and then P3 is a 12x36 module size. And the image is actually, that's not the correct color. They're all going to be a charcoal gray color. And then for our wood decks, we're proposing Ipe for that. So I believe that covers it. We do have construction details I'm happy to share with you. It's pretty minimal. We just have a paving detail and our standard planting details to share with you. But if there's any questions, happy to go over those. And we also have our irrigation plan, of course. Otherwise, I'll turn it back to Michael if there's anything else.
Yeah, Chair Moore and members of the board, that other than some other site details and a whole set of documents that we have, if you want to go through them, that concludes our presentation. We're here to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. With that, we will open public comment. If there's anybody out there in the public that would like to address the board, you can follow the instructions on the screen, and that will alert us.
Chair Moore, at this point, I do see a few members of the public logged into the webinar, but I don't see that anybody has raised their hand. Mary, have you received any written public correspondence on this item?
Thank you, Christina and Chair Moore. No written correspondence was received for this item.
Okay, thank you. Then we will close public comments and go to questions. Does anybody have any questions? Ms. Vice Chair Six, go ahead. Chair Moore, did you Mr. Holliday, did you take, if we could see the north elevation, did you take the, I won't bias it by saying unfortunate, but the stone veneer off of the portion of the elevation where the sign is, under the eave after the entry, Slingshot Studio, Art Studio, that now plain veneer, plain stucco or color differentiation?
Chair Moore, Board Member 6, exactly. We removed all that stone. It's going to be a plaster color. Actually, let's go, if we could go to the last page. It's one thing I didn't cover, which has got all the colors and materials board, which is part of what we submitted. It should be the
That's
very
okay.
last.
I
Or
think
say
the
you
board
could-
member, I think the board members have reviewed that.
Yeah. Yes, it
Thank
is
you.
removed.
That's my question.
Okay. Anybody else with questions?
No question.
Okay. I did go back and watch the previous hearing, but I do not recall if we went through the typical details like parapet, et cetera. Was that all sorted through?
Oh,
Last
gosh,
time?
no, I don't think, well, I think we looked at individually at details. We didn't review them
Okay.
publicly.
Okay. All right. So if there are no more questions, we'll move on to comments. If we could have all our board members up. And if we have the applicants turn off their webcams and mute themselves so we can get all the board members on one screen.
Now,
Great.
Chair Moore.
Yes.
I think this is ready for final, and just one item is, I was hoping for a traditional fixture at this front entry, and I don't consider what was done is traditional. Also, it's very contemporary to see, well, it is very glaring to see a bare bulb, and would like to see a more traditional light fixture at that front position. And I think perhaps that could be sorted out on consent after final.
Mhm. So specifically in this, for instance, in this view,
Yes.
the fixture is obviously a little more traditional than what was presented today. Is that, that's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else with comments?
I only have one comment. I think it's ready for final. I think we should move in that direction.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree. And I think any of these little fixes, we should just ask for staff to confirm that the changes have been made. So I think we should move them along as best we can.
So I will make a motion for final approval as presented, with the exception that the applicant shall return to staff after final with a traditional light fixture for the front elevation.
I'll second.
Okay. And the question for staff, is that something that you can handle, or do you need something more specific than that?
Thank you, Chair Moore. Thank you for that clarification. I think in this case, what I would probably do is when I get the spec sheet, send it on email to one of you to take a look quickly and see if it meets that specification.
Okay, great.
It seems to me that what we want is a fixture like the one he's drawn on his elevation.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so we had our first and second, we had some clarification of the process. So if there's nothing else, no other discussion, let's take our vote.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and start with Chair Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Six,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Black,
Yes.
Board Member Olson,
Yes.
and Board Member Whalen.
Yes.
All right, thank you. The motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And, oh yes, we have to announce the 10-day appeal period, which you can follow the instructions on the screen. All right, we can move on to item number 4, which is 3225 Calle Piñon. It's project design and final approval. This is a proposal for a new 900 net square foot portable classroom at Providence School. The proposed classroom is a pre-engineered portable classroom and proposed to be used for music classes and located on existing asphalt paving. The proposed classroom will not increase the current student count is in substantial conformance to the project approval granted by the Planning Commission. Project design and final approval is requested. This project requires compliance with project compatibility analysis and Upper State Street area design guidelines. Okay, we have our applicant here. Welcome, and you take us through your project, please.
Good evening, Chair Moore, fellow board members. My name is Joe Androlitis with Androlitis Mixon Architects. So Providence School approached us probably a year and a half ago to get this portable approved for their campus. And our first go failed because Creek was requiring stormwater improvements based on the size of the portable. So we had to sit it out for a while, and the need became urgent once COVID hit. And then we were able to resubmit once the stormwater guidelines are revised. So we no longer are required to do the stormwater improvements. I'll take you to the site plan, which is the 4th sheet. So what you're seeing is the entire block where the school resides. To the east is the existing Catholic church. In the middle is the existing school. To the west is the asphalt play area, parking lot, and playground. Towards the southwest corner along Calle Cedro is the proposed location of the portable. It's going to sit along a hedged fence between the existing trash enclosure and the playground. If we can open up the site photos, please. So first photo is the driveway entrance looking towards the east. The bottom photo is the driveway entrance looking towards the west. You can see the large oak tree. Next photo, please. These two photos are what you see of the area where the portable is proposed to be located. So you can see there's a significant amount of vegetation and a screened fence, which is approximately 8 feet tall. Next slide, please. So top photo is the area you see where the picnic tables are. That would be the area of the portable. And then this is looking at the area of the portable along the fence line looking towards the northwest. Can you return back to the site plan, please? As you're probably aware, this is a standard portable that you've seen on every public campus throughout the city and county. There's not much we can actually do to change it. So we're just looking for a location acceptance as we've shown. The drawings provided are standard state architect drawings that are typically reviewed and approved by the state. Since this is a private school, we're under your jurisdiction to review and approve. Typically, this would just get completely bypassed through the state level. The elevations of the portable can be seen on page 11. So here you can see the standard side elevations, rear and front elevation of the portable. Like I said, it's a standard portable like you've seen at every campus walking your kids to school. Colors is probably our only option. The colors will be painted to match the existing facility. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. And we will open public comment. You can follow the instructions on screen if you wish to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair Moore. I do see a few members of the public that have logged into the webinar. If you would like to speak on this item, please click the raise your hand button. At this time, I don't see that anybody has clicked that button. Mary, have we received any written public correspondence?
Thank you, Christina. We did receive one correspondence from Elizabeth Boucher, and it was distributed to the board before this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, then let's close public comment and go to any questions from the board.
No question.
Mr. Whalen, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Moore. Mr. Andrewlitis, were there other sites considered and other building options considered for this project?
No other building options, no permanent structures proposed. They're not sure how long the need is for the portable at this point. This location was the best suited. It didn't disrupt any existing parking or existing play areas.
And one more follow-up question, if I may. Is there any sort of proposed timeline or schedule for removal?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, thank you. That's all I have, Chair Moore.
Okay, any other questions?
Chair Moore, can Mr. Bolton go to the site photos? And the question being, is this where the hedge was, or yeah, right, that bottom one. So we're going to be seeing the hedge is 8 feet. The structure is 11.7. So we're going to be seeing 3'7" of this structure over the hedge, correct? Mr. Andriolis, sorry.
Well, the portable will be more to your right where the tree is. You can see the playground structure to your left. So I didn't do any angles as far as sight lines. But yeah, you probably may see a portion of the roof from this angle.
So that big tree in back of the hedge, in back of the hedge is the portable is on the right-hand side of that.
Correct. You can use the play structure as a reference to your left.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So it's fair to say that we'll see about how much laterally of the structure structure from the end before this tree in front of the edge covers it.
Yeah, like I said, you'd see a portion of it. It is set back, so the sight lines may cover more than what we would anticipate seeing, because it has to be out of a side yard setback.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Just one question from me. Does the property line, is it at the back of the sidewalk? So the school controls that landscaped area,
Yes.
buffer area? Okay. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions before we move to comments? No? Okay, let's go to comments. Does anybody have issues with this location or colors? Vice Chair Six, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I have a real problem when the board has to find compatibility analysis and design approval of a structure that, will probably be there for more than ever. And so I wish there was a different process by which these things could be processed through and accepted, other than going before the ABR and having the ABR lie about, the compatibility analysis and so forth. But being that I don't want to be direct, I hear the need for dire need and so forth. So I would suggest that I could approve this if there was additional landscaping brought to bear in that landscape area, either a replacement with a more healthy, higher shrub, a hedge in the existing hedge location, or other planting that would dominate and overtake the height of this structure, so it would be completely invisible from the street. Those are my comments.
Okay. Is there somebody want to add anything or have a differing view?
I guess Mr.
Go
Chair,
ahead. Yeah.
I would ask the question, what kind of hedge is that, and could it be just grown taller to do what we want it to do? I don't recognize it from the photograph, but realize that's really not part of this design proposal necessarily, but it could mitigate some of the concerns.
Okay.
I don't know how you would enforce that, but
that could be a comment.
Yeah.
To augment, because it appears the hedge gets trimmed to be that height. So.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Well, does somebody want to try and craft a motion around that?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would have the motion that this be indefinitely continued to the consent calendar, with the applicant to propose, with the help of a professional landscaper, additional planting or confirmation that the existing hedge can be grown higher to fully hide this from not only the street to the south, but bring other photos to convince the consent calendar member that it's not in view from any other public views.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Olson. Any discussion? No? Okay, let's take our vote.
All right, I'll go ahead and start with Chair Moore.
Yes.
Can I
Sorry,
make one quick comment?
we're in the middle of this. Sorry.
Well, it has to deal with your comment, because I don't think I don't think I can have anything over 8 feet in the setback. Am I correct?
That'd be
Chair
a
Moore-
question for staff. No, go ahead.
Chair Moore, if you'd like me to answer that question.
Yes.
In this zone, it's possible to have a slightly higher, but you need to get a minor zoning exception for that request. So that's, and that's an additional mail notice on an additional hearing.
Mhm. Well, this landscape element could also be a tree. It could be something else that is not a hedge. So I think there's some options there that they could pursue. So we're in the middle of our process. Let's continue, unless the maker of the motion wants to withdraw that motion or change it.
If I understand it, if they introduce other vertical plant material that are not quote unquote a trimmed hedge, they can go beyond the 8 feet, correct, staff?
Correct.
Correct.
Yes, that's, but it has to be like a tree, not some kind of plants. Our definition of a is like pretty broad, so it's like vegetation planted closely together. So it has to not be, the hedge would have to, if it's larger, greater than that, it needs to have a minor zoning exception.
Okay, so with those understandings, I think that the applicant hears the limitations and can further research that and come up with a solution. So I would maintain my motion.
Okay, then let us take our vote.
All right, thank you. I'll start over. So we have Chair Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Six,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Black,
Yes.
Board Member Olson,
Yes.
and Board Member Whalen.
I'm going to vote no.
All right, thank you. The motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I believe that's our last item. And with that, I will adjourn today's Architectural Board Review meeting. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.